The next is the Project Finance Zone, or PFZ. This is incremental state revenue that we're able to reinvest for specific purposes, and I'm going to come back and talk about that in a second, but it is also based on hot taxes, sales taxes within a hotel, so those are also primarily going to be paid for by visitors or people using hotels. The Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone, again, an economic development tool that we can use that's allowed under state law that allows us to capture property taxes within a geographic boundary and reinvest those for either development or redevelopment purposes. It does not change the amount of tax that anybody pays inside of that boundary, but it allows the entity to capture that and redirect that to specific purposes like economic development. The private sources are a range of things. It could be everything from private equity from firms to ground leases paid by private developers to leases for something like the arena. Of course, we got the San Antonio Spurs listed there as a contribution to the arena project. We've got the venue tax, which is the county venue tax that's comprised of a current 1.75% hotel occupancy tax and a 5% motor vehicle rental tax. So again, if you're not renting a hotel or using a hotel or short-term rental or renting a car, you're not paying this tax. City capital is going to be primarily, we're talking about our general obligation bonds or our bond elections. These would be something that the voters would approve. It would be property tax supported debt that, as you can see in the matrix, we would only use towards the land bridge or infrastructure within the district. And then, of course, as part of this effort, we plan to pursue, where we can, federal and state funding to help with either projects or infrastructure as we move forward. Moving over to the left-hand side of this matrix, the convention center expansion is listed there at the top. The last time we talked about this in the last presentation, we had a range there of $700 million to $900 million. Based on the work we have done to date, we have now set that project budget and are recommending a $750 million budget for that convention center expansion, and we're using that for our planning purposes. The arena is still listed there at $1.2 to $1.5 billion. The Alamo Dome revised project is you recall that we talked about on the Alamo Dome, the major renovations project. We have pushed that out in time to around 10 years from now. It's probably the window of time we're looking at. This revised project is what are the things that we need to do to make sure the Alamo Dome stays operational? And are there things that we can do that are smaller in costs, but that have an ROI on them that we can then turn around and improve the performance of the dome over the next 10 years or so. The Wood Courthouse, the range there is the same. We're about to wrap up the feasibility on the conversion of that Wood Courthouse into some type of entertainment venue. We're going to move into really trying to work on and identify what are the private funding sources that we can use to get this project done. The timing on this one's going to be a bit fluid because it's going to depend on what those funding sources look like and what we're able to accomplish. The Convention Center Hotel is still at $750 million plus. The timing has changed a bit. You're going to see later on in the presentation that it is now in the second phase. So first phase is the first 5 years. Second phase is going to be years 6 through 15. I would say the hotel is probably on the earlier years on that second phase, so in the 6, 7, 8 year time frame. That's primarily due to the fact that the proposed location for this hotel is where the existing chill water plant for the San Antonio water system is. So we are doing feasibility work with SAWS that is beginning to look at where we can relocate that facility to, and not only relocate it, but we need to expand it. So when you talk about all the projects that I just went over, the arena, the expanded convention center, all the private development opportunities that are in the district, we're going to need more capacity from that chill water plant as well. So it's both a move and an increase in capacity. So given that, we think that the time frame is probably, again, outside the first 5 years. On infrastructure, you're going to see, as Eric mentioned, the range on kind of the traffic and pedestrian-related improvements. Projected cost range for the first 5 years within the district, and Tom is going to go over that more in his section of the presentation. That last part on the acquisition of the property from UTSA and GSA, that $60 million is what we had presented before. I did want to spend a minute talking about the Project Finance Zone You all did approve a few weeks ago dissolving the zone that we created in December of 2023 and recreated or created a new zone that is pictured here on the map. And you designated, with that action, we designated the Convention Center complex as our qualifying project under this program. That complex is comprised of the Convention Center, a potential NBA arena, and major improvements to the Alamo Dome. Again, what this zone does is allows us to capture the incremental state hotel associated revenue for 30 years within that zone. The zone is that 3-mile circle that you see there on the map. The center of that circle is the epicenter of the Convention Center, the arena, and the Alamo Dome. So if you created a triangle, got to the center of that triangle, drew a 3-mile circle, that's what you see on the map. What that means is we capture the state's growth like a TERS. They set a base, but as those revenues grow inside of this zone, we're capturing that. And it includes the state's hotel occupancy tax from hotels within that zone, as well as the state sales tax, state mixed beverage sales tax, and the state mixed beverage gross receipts tax for businesses and hotels that are businesses that are within hotels and hotels within that 3-mile zone. The change was really important for us. This is a really critical financing tool for us that the state is allowing us to reinvest their dollars into this zone. With your action a couple of weeks ago and designation of the complex, it gives us a great deal more flexibility in terms of how we can use this over the next 30 years. Again, think about it like a TERS where it's going to grow slowly over time. On the front end, it's going to probably be a couple $1 million a year, but as it goes forward in time, that number will get larger. This flexibility is really important so that we're then able to use that. I do want to highlight, because I've heard a couple of things about, you have all this money in the project finance zone, why not do streets or roads or sidewalks with it? I mean, these are state dollars that the state is allowing us under their program to redirect and reinvest into things like this district. And there are restricted uses in terms of what we can use the dollars for. It is limited to a convention center or a venue. A venue can be a coliseum, an arena, some use like that. And really what they're doing is they're saying, we understand that Texas, San Antonio, all the cities here, we're in competition with the rest of the country and internationally for visitors. And so they're saying, we'll allow you to use some of our dollars to invest in projects that we believe will drive visitors to the state and to San Antonio. And we certainly believe that what we're talking about with this district meets that definition and the intent of what the state is trying to do with those dollars. But I think the important thing here to note is that it is restricted in use. We can only use it for that purpose. Moving over to the Convention Center project in terms of how we're proposing to finance this. I'll start over on the right-hand side of this slide. Up on top are the revenue sources that would be used to support a bond issue to fund the expansion of the Convention Center. You see our 2% hotel occupancy tax listed there. I mentioned 9% is our total. The 2% is a dedicated tax. It can only be used for an expansion, a cost related to an expansion, or debt service related to an expansion. We have had that tax in place for a number of years. It's what we use today. We would continue to use that going forward. On the far right-hand side, you see a portion of the 7% hotel occupancy tax. We use that today to support debt service on the current building that we have in place, our current debt service. So we continue to use a portion of that going forward. The piece that is new that we're adding in is we're using a portion of that project finance zone or PFZ dollars that we're getting from the state. We're now using a portion of that here to help us get to where we need to be in terms of a convention center expansion budget. All of those revenues go into a public facilities corporation that allow us to issue debt. Those revenue streams will be used to repay that debt, and we believe we can get to a $750 million convention center expansion project budget, total project budget. And then we have also built in about $100 million over the next 10 years to support the Alamo Dome operations until we get to a point where the city can potentially proceed with a much larger renovation of that facility. We are doing a facility assessment right now of the dome. This could adjust a little bit based on what we get back out of that assessment. We did an assessment a few years back, but we wanted to update it. We just want to make sure that we're not missing anything and that we can ensure that the dome continues to function and operate going forward. On the convention center side, that $750 million project budget, and again, no design has been done, but based on the due diligence done to date, we believe that that project budget will allow us to build what we believe we need and what our stakeholders believe we need. So the goal is to increase contiguous exhibit hall space by about 200,000 square feet. It's going to add in some new meeting room space, ballroom space, and the required support space. And so that project will be coming back and talking to you in more detail about why we think we need to expand at those levels. On the dome, I mentioned the ongoing facility assessment. The $100 million is really focused on the operational capital that we need to ensure the building can function. But we do also and are exploring options for what are some less expensive improvements that we could make to the dome that either significantly would improve fan experience or visitor experience, people that are attending events at the dome, or have a potential higher return that would allow the dome to generate more revenue. So we're going to explore those as well as part of this process. I'm going to move over to the proposed financing structure for the arena. This is a graphic representation of what we think the structure for the arena looks like. And you can see there that we've got three main sources, three main entities that would be funding the arena. The cost is $1.3 to $1.5 billion. This would be building a state-of-the-art arena for the San Antonio Spurs, one that meets NBA standards, but it would involve a contribution from the city, the county, and the Spurs. On the city side, what we would be doing is using revenues from the arena lease, the lease that the Spurs would pay for, development in the Hemisphere Tours, the tax increment reinvestment zone, ground leases from some of the private development parcels that I'm going to show you in a second, as well as some of the dollars in that state project financing zone, or PFZ. Those are the sources of revenue that would be used to support a bond issue that would allow the city to make a contribution to the arena. I'm going to go on the next slide in a little more detail on all of those elements. And then in addition to that, remember that we've talked about the fact that the city would be moving forward with acquiring the ITC property from UTSA. We've got an appraised value that we believe is projected to be around $60 million, and we're working on a financing that we would bring forward to you all that would come out of the Midtown Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone, or TERS. On the county side, it's that venue tax that I mentioned, so the county hotel occupancy tax and the motor vehicle rental tax are what make up the venue tax. We think certainly this is a key and significant an important piece of the funding for the arena. And then, of course, funding from the Spurs would be a major element of this as well. So let me go a little bit deeper on what we're talking about on the city contribution to the arena. And this table and what I'm talking about in terms of a bond issue is our contribution to the facility. So this excludes the land acquisition that I mentioned we're looking at doing through the Midtown TERS. But this focuses on those elements that we're working on in order to create a bond issue that would allow us to make a contribution to the arena. The first is the arena lease. So if the arena is built, the Spurs will be paying a lease to the entity that owns it'll be a local government corporation. We would take the value of that lease and we would use it as part of this bond issue. The next is the Hemisphere Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone, or TERS. The Hemisphere TERS was created in 2017. It doesn't have a lot of tax value today. Its increment last year was about $650,000. So that's the existing tax increment reinvestment zone of TERS. There is an in-progress P3. Zachary's building a hotel there along South Alamo. That will come online In the next year or two, it will hit the tax roll, so that will generate a little bit of increment that we will be able to use towards the project. And then the new development piece. So as part of this project, what we've talked to the Spurs about, and I'll show you on the map on the next slide, that we have parcels available for private development. And what we've talked to the Spurs about is bringing a developer in to develop those sites. We're going to be looking for developer guarantees on the revenue coming off of that development, and we would then use that as part of the financing and our contribution towards the arena. The ground leases for those private development parcels would be paid for by private developers. They would be contractually committed under a ground lease to make those payments to us. And then the last is the project financing zone, which captures those incremental state revenues within that 3-mile zone around our qualifying project. So when you look at where would the funding or revenues come from for the city bond issue, I'm going to use the word, the city's almost like a conduit. We're not taking things out of our operating budget. We are using lease revenues from the Spurs. We're using lease revenues from private developers or a developer, and we're using the state's hotel associated revenue through this PFZ in order to do this bond issue. So it is either revenues coming from other parties as part of this project, or things that we're driving in terms of development within the project that we're then capturing and then turning that into a bond issue that we can make a contribution to the arena on. These are the parcels we were talking about on the previous slide. So there are 2 phases listed here, and this is just kind of a simple representation of what we're talking about. But we have the blue shaded areas, what we're calling phase 1. These would be private development parcels that are available around an arena site, the former ITC site, that would be available for private development to go on, as well as the GSA properties there that are highlighted. So that's considered phase 1. Phase 2 are the parking lots in the areas around the Alamo Dome. What we have been talking to the Spurs about is phase 1, those blue parcels. They would not be the developer for those, but rather they would bring us the development partner or partners that we would then seek to get guarantees on. Similar to what we did on baseball, we're not looking for necessarily guarantees on you build X or Y. We want guarantees on you're going to build X and Y, and you're going to guarantee the amount of revenue that we're estimating to come off of those developments. That then puts us in a position where we can manage our risk, and we can then use that and leverage that into a bond issue to support the arena project. This slide, I'm not going to go through all of these. We are in the early stages of conversations with the Spurs on a term sheet. The number of provisions here that we would expect to be in a term sheet, and I mean, you could typically, I'm not going to read them all, but obviously the contributions from the 3 parties, the city, the county, and the Spurs are going to be an important part of the term sheet. Everything from ownership of the arena and the arena site and how we do that, operations and maintenance of the facilities. It will include a requirement that the parties work together, the city and the Spurs, to develop traffic and security plans as you think about the district and all of the improvements and the anchor projects and what we're trying to accomplish. So that will be an important piece of what we'll need to work on. Naming rights, broadcast rights, and community benefits. Our negotiations with the Spurs, we had the MOU executed on April 3rd between the city, the county, and the Spurs. The city has been engaged in negotiations with the Spurs. We have primarily talked about the financing structure and the concept that I went over a couple of slides ago, and really trying to begin to fill in what do those things look like. What does the arena lease look like? Once we get a development partner selected and we engage with them, what do those development numbers look like? That's why I didn't give you a range in terms of what the city contribution would be, because it is going to hinge completely on what's the level of arena lease, What can we generate off the private development? What can we generate off the ground leases? And then we have the project financing zone, or PFZ revenues. But remember, we're using those as for the arena project, but we're also using them to help support the convention center expansion project. So all important elements, but until we get some of those things nailed down with more certainty, that's really what's going to drive the level of contribution that the city can put into the arena. We have talked about the fact that we would need revenue guarantees from that developer. And then in terms of the development partner, the Spurs are going through a process to select a development partner or partners. They're going through that process now. And again, once that partner or partners are selected, then there'll be further negotiations with them and discussions about what those guarantees look like and how that then fits into a city bond issue. Went over on the previous slide some of the major provisions we expect to be in a term sheet that we would bring, a non-binding term sheet that we would bring forward for city council consideration later this summer. And then we've also began the conversation around community benefits, and that will need to be an important element or an important part of the term sheet as well. On community benefit agreements, we have, our group, our team has looked at a number of different publicly available community benefit agreements from across the country. They have looked at a variety of them from different professional sports. We've looked at some NFL franchises. We've looked at some NBA franchises. We've looked at NHL, MLB. Some are executed, some are in draft. But we just kind of wanted to see, is there a sense, could we get a sense of, is there a standard for the CBAs? Or there's something that would help shape this for us a little bit? And really what we walked away with is they really vary widely from agreement to agreement. And some of the major pieces that you'd see in there, of course, are the parties to the agreement. It ranges between the team or a representative of the team, an entity representing the team, and a city, a county, or sometimes it's a community advocacy group. Targeted benefits, it ran the gamut. You see some of them I'm going to go over in a second on the right-hand side of this slide, and that is not an exhaustive list, but they varied pretty significantly. Funding varied as well. Some cases there were just targets in places. Sometimes there's recurring revenue streams, and sometimes there's one-time injections of cash. Enforceability varied as well. It ran the gamut from recommendations, which aren't enforceable, but just recommendations of things you were trying to get done, to agreements that had enforcement provisions in there to include remedies. Even the terms of the agreements varied on the community benefit piece. Some ran in conjunction or in parallel with the lease for the facility, the stadium or the arena. Some were shorter in duration. Some only ran 5 to 10 years. So we saw a lot of variation within all of these agreements. So based on our review to date, what we've looked at so far, there is no standard agreement. So I think for us, it's really going to be important to determine what it is that we want to get as a community. Part of that will be getting the feedback from you all here in terms of the things that we're looking for. Part of it will be through the community engagement process. We'll look at all that, look at these agreements. We'll, of course, make our recommendation as well, but also want to make sure it's something that's practical and feasible and something that we can execute. Some of the benefits that we saw in these agreements, and again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but these were some of the ones that we saw in more of the agreements. So things like contributions to local sports teams or leagues, equipment, tickets, free tickets, discounted tickets, various types of business initiative programs, education programs. We saw affordable housing pop up in several of them, workforce job training programs, preferences for women and minority-owned contractors and businesses, local businesses, beautification projects, and youth programs. So those are just some examples of kind of what we saw in a lot of these agreements. And again, we'll come back and have more conversation on this. At this point in the presentation, let me turn it over to Tom Carter, who is a Senior Vice President with Pape Dawson. He's going to do the next section of the presentation. Tom?
Cool, thanks. Thanks, Ben. Tom Carter, I'm a Senior Vice President with Pape Dawson Engineers, and I'm here today to talk about the work we've been doing on Marvel for the last year. Pape Dawson is kind of uniquely qualified to work on this project. This team has worked on most of the major projects in San Antonio over the last 20 years. We worked on the Frost Bank Center, we've worked on the Convention Center expansion, we've worked on Toyota, we've worked on a lot of private sector projects, including Pearl and other developments in San Antonio. We also, from our traffic and transportation group, who've been intimately involved in this project, have worked on lots of projects for the city and for TxDOT in the San Antonio area. And we also do work all over the state of Texas and the South. For this project, we took some work that we have done for the city for like the last 20 years, traffic models of the downtown operations that speak to just overall traffic, operations, signal timing, that type of stuff. And we built out the model to reflect the southeast corner of the city and really looked at what the proposed improvements with Marvel and the Alamo Dome and everything else that's in that corner of the city, what that's going to need as far as traffic improvements to make it all work and for us to be happy with it. We've also looked at other sports venues in other cities that have similar situations and what they've done and done well to manage the traffic that a dual arena stadium situation would have. So our main goals for today are to talk about traffic improvements, pedestrian access, district parking, transit access, and we have our friends from VIA here that are going to talk more about their plans, and rideshare. Our goals for everything that we're doing is really, number one, to respect the neighborhoods and protect the neighborhoods in the area of the arena and the district. And we want to make sure that the neighborhoods stay safe and walkable, and that to be successful, we want to show improved drive time for the sports and entertainment district from what we have today. And we've been very active the last even few weeks with the past concert with Post Malone and Jelly Roll. We did some analyzation, had drones in the air, kind of studied the traffic on that event, and then also worked with SAPD on the way they're managing it and are making some recommendations. Our team is making some recommendations to implement for upcoming concerts. We've also looked a lot at transit and rideshare and park and ride options. We want that to be a key element of the traffic plan for the district, that we have way more people using those venues to get to the facility than we have today. And then we want to make sure that parking is accessible and that the transit options all work for the visitors to the district. We've had a lot of coordination. We've met with TxDOT and studied their downtown feasibility studies and talked with them about funding. We've talked to the U.S. Department of Transportation on funding for the land bridge option. We've had several meetings with VIA, both about park and ride options, as well as the Silver Line and Green Line, their advanced transportation systems. Their city staff have had meetings with the neighborhoods, with King William, Lavaca, Denver Heights, Dinwiddie Hill, and other downtown groups. And we'll talk in a second about a residential parking permit program and streets and traffic improvements. On the city side, we've had extensive meetings with the city manager's office, with the convention and sports facilities, the police department, the transportation department, public works, and the Center City Development Office. We've identified a number of needs, and the first one that came from the neighborhood meetings was a residential parking permit program. We want to make sure that parking is convenient to the district and that we don't find folks going into the neighborhoods and looking for parking and then walking into the district. And that was a big message from the neighborhood meetings. We have reached out to the neighborhood groups and asked them to put up representatives for a task force to try to develop what that parking permit program could look like. We also want to improve communication to the stakeholders, the neighborhoods and other stakeholders. We're talking about emails, text messages, neighborhood meetings, that type of stuff. We also have a lot of major system needs as far as improvements to traffic infrastructure. The first one that we see is we want to improve Cesar Chavez as a pedestrian street. I worked years ago on the master plan for H Park when it was first being developed, and that was a comment from that plan, was making Cesar Chavez more pedestrian friendly. It's a great car street, and we want it to maintain a great car street. We don't want to reduce any capacity on that street, but we want to build pedestrian facilities that make access to the district more friendly for both bicycles and pedestrians. We want to construct a new pedestrian bridge, it was mentioned a few times, between the plaza level of the Alamo Dome and the plaza level of the new arena to cross over 37. Now, this is different than the park that we're proposing in a later phase, but we want to get this pedestrian bridge in now to make sure that we can utilize parking facilities on either side of the highway. And then the other system improvement that we're talking about, or the next one, is construction of a 2,500 car parking garage in Lot A of the Alamo Dome. And that will serve both the Alamo Dome and the arena, and the pedestrian bridge will be the link that will tie that together. We have a number of traffic improvements that we want to do along Highway 37. The first one is we want to construct a ramp between Montana and Commerce Street to get onto the freeway. As it sits today, if you were to turn off of Cesar Chavez and head north, you have to go through 2 lights to get on the highway. We want to have an option to get on the freeway with only going through 1 light. That will help separate the traffic that's south of the Alamo Dome and north of the Alamo Dome and give us better access onto the freeway. That also works very well with the Thompson Center to be able to take buses out of the Thompson Center and get them on the freeway quickly so they don't get caught in traffic with the rest of the event traffic. We want to improve a number of intersections around the district. The key one that we're talking about is the exit ramp off of 37 southbound on Commerce. We want to be able to improve the number of lanes there. Right now there's 3 lanes. Want to widen that out to 5 lanes and get some dual turn lanes onto Commerce Street and increase the capacity and carrying capacity of that intersection. And then we want to modify the southbound lanes adjacent to the convention center to carry 2 lanes of traffic through there as well. And then the big move is a innovative intersection at the intersection of Cesar Chavez and 37. It's called a single point urban interchange, or SPUI. This is a rendering of what that would look like. This is similar to the intersection that, it's bigger, but similar to the intersection of Harry Wurzbach and Austin Highway that has been in place for several years. But this allows for better motions and more carrying capacity through the intersection. The plan would increase the traffic carrying capacity of that intersection from about 3,200 cars to over 5,000 cars, 5,100 cars through that. It will require TxDOT coordination, but we have talked to the district engineer and TxDOT staff, and they are supportive of the plan. This is just another rendering of that intersection to kind of get your head around how it functions, but it allows for 4 cycles or 4 phases of the intersection. That's really the same as what's out there now, but in the current configuration, only 1 motion is allowed at a time. This allows for multiple motions to happen at the same time with these innovative crossovers. Pedestrians are allowed to cross through this intersection. There is a plan for pedestrian access, just like you would have it at a normal intersection, but we do want to discourage pedestrian traffic through this intersection during event time and really try to encourage the traffic, pedestrian traffic, to go to the bridge over 37. Major system improvements, we really, these are more on the transit side, and we'll let our friends at VIA speak to this in more detail in a minute, but we want to maximize the Robert Thompson Transit Center. We have looked, it was a discussion with VIA, has Robert Thompson met its time, or is it the best use for the district? And we really feel like it is still the best use for the district. We want to leverage the advanced transportation systems that they're putting in place with the silver and green lines. And we want to do some innovative things to promote a better parking plan, to allow both public and private garages to sell parking in advance of the event. And so when people come to an event, they know where they're going, and they don't just automatically exit a Commerce and end up caught in traffic with everybody else in the city. And then we really would like to integrate that parking purchase plan in the ticket platform. So when you buy a ticket to the show, you've got a even maybe cost-effective option for that parking. We see that there's an opportunity to leverage parking in several areas, specifically around the Alamo and La Villita. Are some kind of underutilized parking areas. They're 10 to 15-minute walk to the facility, so we really want to maximize those, and that may ultimately result in some P3 parking garage options or some other method to improve that parking. We want to establish multiple rideshare options and make rideshare really viable, and try to create situations that avoid surge pricing on that parking, on that rideshare. And then an interesting thing that we've discovered in conversations with the Alamodome staff, when these large shows come in, like the recent concert, they had over 30 tractor trailers that came in for that concert, and the only place they could put them is in the parking lot of the Alamodome. We want to find a marshaling yard that's 3 to 5 miles away from the facility that we can allow them to go park their trucks and still, move in quickly after the event to help them, move the show on, but allow us to maximize the parking facilities that the city has. So what I was talking about before is really the 1 to 5 year plan of improvements. This is our 6 to 15 year plan. We want to continue that conversation of a land bridge and big event plaza over the freeway between the Alamodome and the arena. We think that's a huge opportunity for the facility. We've got some other traffic improvements that we would like to propose, because we feel like there's some underutilized infrastructure in the city, specifically Houston Street. When you come to an event, Commerce Street is super busy, but Houston doesn't have hardly any traffic on it. And Nolan, which you can actually go under the train tracks, is hardly used. And so we want to encourage and improve the access on those facilities. We want to improve the pedestrian feel of Cherry Street. And then also there's a street called Hofgren on the south that we feel like should be improved to operate more like a frontage road to improve access from the south. In summary, we want to maximize reliable bus transportation to the district, including the Robert Thompson Transit Center. We want to implement traffic improvements to address existing conditions. We want to leverage parking opportunities within 10 to 15 minutes of the facility, improve pedestrian connections through the district to promote walkability, and really carry that feel that happens as you walk through Hemisphere Park, over the bridge, and into the Alamodome, and even into the neighborhoods adjacent to there. And integrate and leverage technology with a plan before you go approach. This exhibit is just for your reference. These are the projects that we were proposing. Signal improvements at the red dots. The pedestrian bridge would be generally where that yellow dot is shown. Street improvements on Cesar Chavez, Montana, Houston, and Cherry Streets. We've got the Spooey intersection is the green dot. We've got the garage in the Alamodome parking lot, and then an on-ramp from that garage directly onto the freeway to help improve traffic out of that garage. And this is just for your reference. These are the zones of parking that we see as opportunities for that 10 to 15-minute walk. Eric?
Well, thank you, Tom, and Mayor, City Council members. We're here to expand a little bit about what you've heard from Tom already, and we appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today. So when thousands of people pour into our town, as it is today, whether it's for Fiesta, Spurs games, you name it, San Antonio shines. But behind the scenes, there's a challenge we face every time on how we move people efficiently, safely, and in a way that works for everyone. We know that traffic congestion around these events strain our streets, frustrates our residents, but it also limits the effectiveness of transit. And that's what we've been talking to city staff about. We want our residents, just like yourselves, to remember the event or celebration rather than the gridlock and frustration. With that challenge in mind, we've been working with the City of San Antonio executive team members and consultants to develop a short and long-term approach to unlocking VIA's transit full potential to do what it does well, which is we do really well in moving large groups of people very efficiently. Keep in mind that one bus can take 40 cars off the street. A well-planned partnership can change how this whole city moves during high-demand events and moments. We're looking to build already what's in place. You've heard some mentions already about the Robert Thompson Center. Rod's going to come up here and talk a little bit more details about what that means for us as a technology and as a system. But reaffirming those existing investments, and then also looking about how do we rethink and travel and parking options for the future, as Tom has indicated earlier. We are reconsidering travel and parking options not as afterthoughts, but central to the experience that an individual would have interacting with this district. We're exploring making space for new transit-friendly investments, be open for other innovative solutions, and make it easier, faster, and safer to move large groups of people. We're actively working on a coordinated traffic and transit plan built hand-in-hand with San Antonio Police Department, Public Works, Convention Center, Alamo Dome, and various event organizers. With this comprehensive traffic plan, pulling this all together will prevent the confusion, reducing delays, and enhancing the experience for everyone here. Everyone that experiences the district. Rod's going to come up here and discuss some of those more details in a moment. Now.
Thank you, John Gary. So what I want to talk to you about is our capacity to move a lot of people to the district. There's two main ways we can do that. We're all familiar with Park and Ride. So we want to share with you what we can bring as far as our passengers to the Robert Thompson facility, because it's quite a bit. But often forgot about is our existing service. We have 12 lines that already come to the downtown area with bus stops within a quarter mile of the district. And we can also move quite a few people with those. So with that, let's talk about the first method, which is the Park and Ride. As Tom and John Gary have said, we've looked at many options, and tried to figure out what the best way, what the best location is to bring our passengers to the district. And we keep coming back to the Robert Thompson facility. It's a jewel. It's right in the center of the district. It has the capacity to hold 21 buses at a time. And we can bring, and we've done this before, we've had the George Strait concert and other events, where we can bring 10,000 people within a 2-hour period to the Robert Thompson facility. So quite a bit of numbers coming to that facility. And the originations, where they start the trip, we're all familiar with Crossroads. Over 90% of our passengers come from the Crossroads Park and Ride facility. That's because of habit. They've gone there, they've relied upon that location, and they've gone there over and over again. But it just doesn't have to be just Crossroads. As you can see on this map, we have a bunch of transit facilities at our disposal where we can also transport people from. We're really trying to bring out the Brooks Transit Center because there we have parking, and then we have the ability to also lease a bunch of parking spaces there. So there's just quite a bit of potential to bring a lot of riders to the, from the Brooks Transit Center to the Robert Thompson. So we want to highlight these. These are not the only locations at our disposal. We have also partnered with the Northeast Independent School District to use Blossom. We've used the Frost Bank Center. It has a ton of, 2,000, 3,000 parking spaces available to us. And we're also looking at the zoo parking garage. It's in a parking garage at the proximity to downtown, easy access to the Robert Thompson. So several facilities that we could also partner with our partners to use as well. Now, existing service, this is what typically people don't think about, but as I mentioned, there's 12 routes right now that come to the downtown area, near the district area. They have bus stops within a quarter mile of the district, and that's a 5-mile walking distance. When you look at transit service, our standard is a half a mile or a 10-minute walk, so we're better than that with these 12 stops. In addition to that, in 2031, we will have the Green Line and we will have the Silver Line up and running. So you can see these are hourly numbers and this is capacity. These buses have the capacity. Each bus can hold up to 54 people. We do have a Primo line, and of course the ART lines that we'll be bringing on board. Those have the capacity to have 60 people on them as well. So just our normal routes within an hour, about 3,100 people. And then the Green and the Silver Line, it's 1,400 people. So, you take that to 2 hours, so there's 10,000 people that we can bring to the Robert Thompson through Park and Ride. And here's another, 9,000 people that we can bring just on our existing routes. And this next slide, I just wanted to highlight in red. Those are the bus stops that, for the Silver Line and the Green Line, all within that quarter-mile distance to the district. So once again, it's a 5-minute walk, which is well within the acceptable standards for transit. So with that, I'm going to bring John Gary back up just to close for us.
Thanks, Rod. So, together with the existing, infrastructure, with the new investments that we have coming online, we're talking about moving anywhere to about 15 to 20,000 people out of the Central Business District in a very efficient manner, probably within an hour and a half. The good news is VIA knows how to do this well. It's been doing it for decades. Robert Thompson was actually established about 30 years ago, and it was indeed operating at great capacity over for many of those years. So it's reactivating that and then bringing the Green Line and Silver Line back on. One more mention as well is that our existing system that we have downtown, that can be better utilized, because that existing system that operates every day downtown can help carry additional passengers besides just having it available during special event service. Primo, as an example of a system that everybody recognizes that brand, we see Primo being numbers increasing every time we have Fiesta events, because people are recognizing, residents are recognizing that's a very efficient way to get downtown on an existing service. Doesn't have to be only Park and Ride, but they can utilize more of our existing system that we have. That's a good quality system, and Primo being a great example of that. So our goal is simple, is to make transit the most seamless, affordable, and logical option for residents and visitors alike. But the good news is we're not starting from scratch, as we alluded to, but we also have blueprints from other cities. We have a snapshot in your presentation here of an example from Charlotte, where they have something similar to what we have at the Robert Thompson Center. But that is within a 15-minute walk of 4 major venues. They also have a football stadium, a basketball arena, a baseball stadium, and also across the street's a NASCAR Hall of Fame. Their capacity runs at about, when they're doing events, they're looking at anywhere between 15 to 18% of ticket holders and taking them on transit will exceed that number and that capability here in San Antonio. So these kind of investments not only support the customer experience, but they enhance our urban landscape, tie into walkability goals, and strengthen our identity for public spaces. I think at this time we turn it back to Ben or Eric. Eric? All right, thank you.
Thank you, John Gary. So the infrastructure recommendations that you heard from Tom regarding traffic, parking, pedestrian, we are estimating that to be between $220 and $250 million. And these would be, this is obviously, back to Ben's chart, would be a general obligation project that, if the council chooses, would need to be placed on a ballot to be approved by the voters, considered and approved by the voters. There are two other topics, related topics, that have come up that I included here on the slide. One, and the first time this came up was towards the end of last year in 2024, was about whether or not the council wanted to consider going back to the voters before May of 2027 on an additional affordable housing bond allocation. Tomorrow during a session, you're going to get a post-solicitation briefing from Veronica on our latest iteration of solicitation. You're very familiar with the fact that that $150 million that the public approved in 2022, we have been pushing that into production faster than I think we believed. It was the first time we've done it. And I know some council members have talked about at least having the policy conversation about not waiting until May of 2027 to go back to the voters. So looking for some feedback from you on that. The third area on there, neighborhood improvements, is really tied to the four neighborhoods that I mentioned at the beginning and Tom mentioned in his presentation. The Dignowity, the Denver Heights, Lavaca, and King William area. That has been, Councilwoman Core stepped out. I know she's been engaged in two of those, Councilman McKee Rodriguez. As we've had conversations with those neighborhoods, it's about what can we do, or what should we or need to do in those neighborhoods in order to improve those areas, especially since they surround the eastern and southern boundaries of the entertainment district. So more work to do, and I think that's more of a conversation that I'm looking to the council members to give us some feedback on. Now, all of this, as we're making assumptions, you know, our municipal bond programs historically have been done with no projected increase in the tax rate. And so that is still, from the staff's perspective, part of our analysis and assumptions going into it. We do need to do, and have not done, now that we've got a district infrastructure on the transportation elements, a review of our capacity and the timing and impact on the May of 2027 bond program, which is kind of our standard flag that we have all been marching towards. That should include, and would include from my perspective, the ability to execute the capital programs in a timely manner. That's work that we're going to commence now and assume to come back to the council in midsummer to give you some alternatives. If the council chooses or decides to call for an election on a November ballot, it has to be done before August 18th, later on this summer. So more work for us to do. I am looking for some feedback from the council on the affordable housing and neighborhood improvements, and I think there's probably some we're going to hear potentially as part of the community engagement process on those elements, so I think that'll be an important piece as well. Lori?
Great, and thank you, Eric. The last part of our presentation is on the community planning workshops. And so really this is the first phase of our community planning effort. What we want to do is work with the consultants we brought on, and that includes Mario Pena and Frank Rotnowski. Sorry, Frank, if I butchered your last name. They are from Able City, and they are very talented, and they've helped us design a 2-day workshop, and this 2-day workshop will take place in every council district. Each council district will have their own workshop. The first day, it's going to include focus groups and stakeholder meetings, and then that evening there'll be a public meeting. And then the second day, it's going to do focus groups, stakeholder meetings, and an open house. There will be a bilingual community survey that will go out before and during the community workshops. And then what we'll be asking the community to do is help us develop a set of guiding principles that we can come back to this body right before we have to call the vote for the election. So we have a set of guiding principles that will help guide you through the remaining decisions that need to be made for this project. We will have a phase 2. So phase 1 is really, let's develop the guiding principles. Phase 2 will be a continuation of the process, but it'll focus on those individual projects. So we have not done any design on any project. We want to get the guiding principles to help lead that design effort. And so as we select consultants, for example, for the convention center, they are going to have a community engagement plan. And that community engagement plan will have their own process. The same for the arena, the Alamo Dome, the John Woods Courthouse, or any capital project. And so phase 1 is really getting the feedback from the community so we can incorporate it on the front end for this project, come back to the council with what we're hearing, and bring forward to council that set of guiding principles that will help us through the decision-making process. Now, this is the format for those public meetings. First, for the public meeting, there's going to be a welcome, it's going to be brief, and then there'll be a brief overview of the project and the funding for the project. The remainder of the time is going to be the community engaged at tables, answering questions, asking questions. There'll be discussions going on at each table. And then the last 30 minutes of the meetings, there'll be a report out at each table. Now, the focus groups, these will also be open to the public. And so if you want to go to a focus group on housing or a focus group on public transportation, you're welcome to go. And there's going to be 4 focus groups. It's going to be housing, transportation, and parking, local business opportunities, and public and community space. Before we have discussions on each of those topics, there will be a brief overview of the project to include the funding. So the attendee kind of gets, the context necessary to be able to better inform and engage on those topics. And then the last part is going to be an open house. So the open house, once again, open to the community. You'll be able to walk in and see all the work that has been done over the past 2 days. You'll also be able to ask questions, and so staff will be there to answer questions that the public might have that maybe they didn't get to hear the answer to, or there are new questions they might have. And then we will also be presenting the themes for those guiding principles and guiding principle examples. So we might hear a lot of concerns about affordable housing. We want to make sure we have a guiding principle on that. Or the participation of local businesses. We might want to have a guiding principle on that. But we're going to listen to what the community is saying so then we can formulate those guiding principles. Now, we've worked with each council district. We are meeting with each council member before we have these sessions, but we have been working with each council member on the actual dates and times. There's a few. We do not have District 1 or District 5 finalized for the location. We're working on that, but we will have these all finalized by tomorrow, and we'll be issuing a press release so the community knows that these are coming and where they're going to be. But you can see we have them set in each council district. We have 3 dates, and we worked with each council member to see what date they could participate. So we will have workshops going on simultaneously in different districts. But for example, you'll see 3 or 4 opportunities on the first workshop, which will be June 24th and 25th. The middle workshop is June 1st to July, and June 30th to July 1st, and the last one is July 8th and 9th. This will allow us to come back to council potentially mid-July or early August with an overview of what we're hearing. So when we come to council for a potential election to be called for November, you have that information and you can make the decision because you know some of that community engagement's already been done. But then after that, we continue the community engagement. We talk about, what's going on with the project, and then after, or if the bond election is approved, then we go into those individual project community engagement plans. So that concludes our presentation. I'm going to sit down. Myself, Eric, Tom Carter, Ben Gorzel, Mario or Frank are here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Eric, Lori, and everybody for the presentation. Now, first, let me just start by acknowledging that, Eric, did you want to wrap up with anything before I start?
I think that presentation was long enough, Mayor.
Okay. All right, let me just start by acknowledging that, as you've seen, a ton of work has been done to determine the general feasibility of this district concept, which makes the work of the decision makers on this dais, both present and future, so much easier. So thank you to all the teams, Eric, Lori, Ben, Andy, John Gary and your team, the folks that are doing our traffic analyses through Pape Dawson, et cetera, as well as the county and the Spurs for being willing to answer the essential question, which is that if the community wants this, could it even happen? A few years ago, we asked ourselves that very question. If we are going to continue to invest in our downtown, and if we are going to continue to see these projects piecemeal come together, which they are in many ways, Hemisphere being one of them, and if we wanted to improve what we believe is one of the greatest downtowns in America, could we do it collectively with a comprehensive vision and intentionally to achieve a big goal to make downtown the kind of visitor and local experience that we've been talking about for a long time. What we've heard today is, yes, it's possible. Yes, we have a path to realize a downtown that is the envy of the world, in my opinion. But also, I want to highlight a few points. The new development will create the value that comprises the revenue sources within this plan. So TERS, PFZ, et cetera, will only occur by way of executing an attractive vision for the district. There have been some assertions that the city revenue sources will scale in value simply because they exist, but that's not the case. They will only deliver their potential when there's more development. And that is true because through this process, we have an opportunity to shape what that development is, and through the PFZ, we would be capturing the revenue that otherwise would be invested in other parts of our state. And that's really been the vision for executing this plan throughout these feasibility studies and discussions. I am especially grateful that we're discussing community benefits at this point early in the process. An entertainment district that enables and guarantees investment in our community is a uniquely San Antonio proposition, and I'm excited to hear feedback from my colleagues about how the entertainment district concept can best work for our city. So thank you again for the presentation. I think there's a lot for us to examine now in terms of the different aspects of this, but overall I'm seeing a path forward for us to be able to execute this vision. So let me now turn it over to our colleagues. We'll start with Councilmember Villagrán.
I'm going to start with the housing bond simply because I want to make sure I don't forget about it in the speaking points. And yes, I do think we need to move forward with a housing bond. And I would have moved this whether we were talking about an arena or not. I think it's important. I think we have opportunity, and I think it's going to help us move our SHIP goals. So I wanted to give you feedback on that, Eric, first off. And then the other thing I wanted to say is regarding this presentation, growth pays for growth, and that is what we're seeing here. And thank you for the presentation, because I think the funding sources slide, the slide on the funding sources, answers a lot of the questions that many of my residents have been asking. And to see it in that format is really great, because I think from there they can ask more informed questions, and from there they can also share their ideas. We have a market for a sports and entertainment district. I think we've had for a while. We just needed to come together and get out of our silos and have that conversation. Spurs have been in San Antonio for about 52 years, since they relocated from Dallas in 1973, and in it they have had an incredible fan base, and we've been through the ups and the downs, and the idea of them coming back to the downtown area where the baseline bums were born, I think is key. But we're going to need for strong public-private partnerships. And I can go on and talk about the jobs it's going to create, the opportunities, and I'm getting an echo. What we have there. So what we have is a real chance to do this right and reignite the energy, vibrancy, and economic activity of our downtown urban core. I think the question we need to ask ourselves right now is, what does a successful sports and entertainment district look like? And we need to be in the mindset, which San Antonio does, is that it is community-centric approach to the venue, to development, and to creating and working towards smart development strategies, which I think this council has done for the last 12 to 16 years. I am glad that we are talking about the community benefits agreement. I think it's good to look at other locations and models, but I think you have a council here that's ready to serve some of the needs that we have in our community that we would like to see. Because as we go through this process, a truly successful sports and entertainment district isn't defined just by the events or the ticket sales, but it's defined by how well it integrates with the surrounding community. And that includes the communities that we have downtown in District 1, and then the communities that go further out into the south and the west and the east and the north side of town. One of my early concerns, and I'm glad that we saw it addressed, and one concern we got from the residents, is the traffic congestion, the pay, the challenges I've experienced firsthand. And we need to look at those mitigation strategies. I appreciate the efforts from Pape Dawson and VIA, but I believe there's going to be quite a bit of that we are going to need to unpack. But thank you all for the beginning and the conversation and reminding us of the opportunities that we have. Rod and that map with all the locations that we can have people using Park and Ride and to get downtown and to enjoy the amenities we have. Let's begin it now before we even start with the big concepts. So let's start that now. Because it's not just moving cars, it's about designing a walkable, compact, and transit-friendly district that encourages people that can arrive by foot, that encourages those with mobility issues that move a little slowly, that they can get there too, and that public transit is going to be reliable. I think we did a great job. And I witnessed firsthand during the Final Four of watching the family-friendly kids, grandparents walk to the basketball games, walk in and around downtown. So we have that opportunity here. We are thriving, and we want a modern entertainment district that it attracts investment and enhances livability while taking into consideration all the sustainability goals that we have. At a core, it's more than an arena. It's more than concert venues. It's more than the Alamo Dome. It's about creating a destination that reflects our identity, culture, and aspirations. So not only, I know I started with, we have a real chance to do this right, but we have a real chance to be the example and beacon for how other cities move forward when we take on this project. And I think that should excite the residents of the city of San Antonio. So we need to make sure that we are keeping the community involved, and look forward to our District 3 community planning workshop scheduled for June 30th and July 1st of this summer at the Southside Lions Senior Center. And thank you so much for the presentation and the efforts. And I look forward to working with the CNE group and the team in San Antonio to make sure that we get this out and that we address our residents' needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Villagrán. Councilmember Cabello-Havrda.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks to everyone that worked on this presentation for the detail and collaboration. I appreciate it. This project, I hate the word transformational, but I think we use it too much. But this is where I think it really, really applies, that this project really has the potential to be transformational. The project positions San Antonio to compete at a higher level with major cities across the country. And I don't mean just in basketball, I mean attracting businesses and attracting opportunity. That's what I'm excited about. I firmly believe that every dollar spent downtown is an economic generator for the entire city, and so I believe in the investment. And as we move forward with that excitement, we also need to move forward deliberately and with care for our communities. I have a number of questions here today, but I just want to be clear that when we cheer on all the new development, that we're also showing the same enthusiasm for neighborhoods and not just the ones within the area, the boundary, I guess, but outside as well. And also that deep history that's been woven into our communities. I'm excited about what's to come. I want to look back in a few years and say that that this project really moved our entire city forward, and I mean our entire city. So I do have a few questions. The community engagement that's integrated throughout the project phases, is that going to continue through not just development, but even after, when it's, if it, it all comes to fruition?
Yes, ma'am. The first phase of it will be the meetings we're working to schedule now, but as Lori mentioned, we anticipate additional touch points through the fall and early 2026, and that was contemplated when we contracted with Able City. It's not just a one and done type of engagement.
Okay. And I know you made a good point about including neighborhoods, which is important, but there's also a good number of workers that commute in and out of downtown. Are they part of these discussions? Have they been specifically invited?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry,
Okay.
I cut you off. Yeah, those are the groups that will be specifically invited to those focus group time during the 2 days. There are a number of stakeholders that we will work with Able City to schedule to make sure that they have an opportunity as a constituency to be able to weigh in.
Okay, I want to be clear, the business owners as well, but I mean like the actual workers that are coming in and out. I'd probably work with some unions to see if they'll bring in some of their members
Yeah.
that work downtown.
Yes. Yesterday I met with Unite 20. Is it Unite 23?
Yeah.
Because they wanted to learn more. They wanted to figure out how they could get engaged.
Great.
So that's an example of somebody who would participate.
Perfect. Thank you very much. While we're on the subject of these meetings, I heard you say there will be some Spanish. Are we providing other translation services? Of course, my always concern is for our special needs community, that we're going to be as accommodating as possible for also shift workers that maybe don't have the opportunity to come in the evenings.
Yes, and that's why my first reaction to a day and a half long community meeting was that not everybody can come,
Yeah.
and so yes, we'll be flexible, and then of course these are Able City is our primary contractor, but they'll be supported by the city. So if there's additional language access issues, then we'll make sure that we accommodate that,
Okay.
sign language and so forth.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. The community benefit agreements, you mentioned, Ben, I think that y'all reviewed some throughout the country. Was there anything that stood out to you about these agreements? And can we get copies of some of them? I'd like to read through them and see what I can glean.
I think, Councilwoman, the thing that jumped out the most to us was the variedness of them in terms of what they were seeking to accomplish and the way they went about doing it. Seemed to be very tailored, specific to communities. We continue to look at them, but we didn't see a common standard agreement. What we saw was a lot of different things that were in there, so that was probably our biggest takeaway.
So is it more of a jumping off point for us? I mean, we have to, you're right, I mean, we have to tailor it to our community. We're not going to take another standard and apply it here, but there wasn't anything sort of to start with.
The ones that I went over on the slide, I don't know, there were like 8 or 9 on that slide. Those are probably the ones that topic-wise popped up the most in agreements. So certainly that might help inform kind of where we go a little bit, but I think to your point, it'll be really important for us to tailor it to, what are we seeking to achieve through a community benefit agreement.
Okay.
One of the things that jumped out to me was that, and that it didn't exist in a lot of them. There were one or two examples, was the after the fact, after the deal, after the announcement, what is the ongoing reporting and transparency about the commitments made? And there were only one or two that probably had something as robust as I would think would exist, and probably that you all would expect exist. Because I think that, I mean, you guys have already talked about something like that. What is it a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, and how are we keeping up with it in terms of informing the public and those types of aspects?
Good, I'm glad that's top of mind for you guys, because that is important, I think, to us, and I'm sure any future council members coming in too. Ben, you mentioned it was revenue, on that same kind of vein, that we're going to require, like, the generated revenues, is that?
Yes, ma'am. So much like we did when we structured the baseball transaction, when we're talking about this new development around the arena and the GSA properties, we're going to be seeking guarantees on the projected revenue to come off of those developments. So not, typical development agreement says I'm going to build X number of units, or I'm going to build X. We want that plus a guarantee that says it's going to generate this much revenue, and that's going to be the guarantee that we're going to look for.
What happens if they don't meet the guarantee? What's the cost for them?
So, and the way we're looking at this is they would be required to make that payment, and then what we're gonna do is, with the developer, we will put something in place to ensure that, almost like a liquidity facility that we can draw against in the event there's some kind of shortfall. So we're gonna build in a couple of levers that would allow us to protect that guarantee.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to move over to transportation briefly. I want to make sure that transportation is being covered not just for specific events that are happening within this district, but kind of every day, and then not just people that are going to the events, but people that live downtown, work downtown. Is that part of the planning or the communication process?
Yes, absolutely. What I gave you was a total capacity of those buses, but yeah, there are normal people that would be taking the buses to different places, not the event, and sure, we would account for those as well.
So that included, the presentation included the?
I just gave you the total capacity, so we would take out people that would be taking it to a different place other than the event.
Okay. And this is probably not a question for you guys, but with VIA kind of expanding and supporting this, is there any plan to help with the cost for what VIA is going to undergo? I know they're pretty tight over there. I'm going to just say that. Is there any way that
I'll answer that question, Rod.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think in conversation with John Gary and Rod and the VIA team, I mean, those are feasibilities that they're going through. They're going through their own operations to make sure they can operationally deliver on the things that they both talked about. That's not done yet, so they're still going through that. I think also we have talked internally about whether or not, because right now there's it's either 50 cents or it's $1 on every Alamo Dome ticket that it goes to VIA to support that. Well, that could be potentially expanded with a new arena across the highway that is serviced. But they're going through that operational feasibility, and I suspect that there will be impacts, and we'll need to sit down and talk through that with them and come back to you all. Because as much as it's great to do the things that John Gary talked about and move a high number of people downtown, they still have a bus system to run.
Right.
So,
and it costs money to do that.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Lastly, I'm really thankful y'all are considering pedestrian and cyclist safety. Is there a plan for moving forward for how pedestrian and cyclist safety will be monitored after everything is done?
Councilwoman, absolutely. I think that as we consider the district, pedestrians are going to take a precedent in a way that doesn't exist today in that sort of corner of the park. And so it will be of great importance that safety remains at the top, and we'll continue to monitor it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I think that's the first time I've ever used my full 10 minutes, but it's worthwhile. It's a really important project. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Cabello-Haverda, Councilmember Pelaez.
Transformational. No, I'm playing with you, Councilwoman. She hates that word. I need to know about the PFZ. Ben, the PFZ, is that managed by an independent board, or is that just going to be managed by your staff, or is that just a geographic designation for purposes of funding?
That is a geographic designation under state law. The comptroller will, we submitted all that to the comptroller. The comptroller will capture that incremental revenue, hold it in an account until we proceed with the project. It's got to happen within 5 years. Once we do, they will just be sending those payments to us, and we'll be using it as part of the project.
Okay. Of all the funding services, I'm sorry, the funding sources that you've identified, that we saw on your charts, if you had to pick one, which one in terms of availability and scope and function is best positioned to fund this project, or the arena?
Councilman, that's a tough question
I
to
know.
answer because none of the sources I've talked about by themselves can get us a meaningful contribution to the arena. So we've talked about the PFZ, the project financing zone, the state revenues. Start small, they get larger. We've got to use them in conjunction with other things. The two biggest things we're looking at are going to be the new development and the guarantees we put in place with the developer. That will be a big piece of it. So it's going to be a combination of things.
Eric looked like he wanted to say something, but no? Okay.
Well, I mean, I'll say, I mean, I think the spurs and the venue tax are an important part of that. And that's why you kind of saw three different areas of that. The development part is important to us to be that conduit, as Ben described. The PFZ is an important tool to deliver multiple projects on. So they're all equally important, and none of them, I think, stand on their own right now
Yeah,
to be able to do it.
But only one requires a public vote, right? And that's the venue tax?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and so, I mean, in terms of most important, maybe not best position, but most important, I would say the venue tax, since we're asking the public's permission to create it, right, and to spend it for a dedicated purpose. Which brings me to my third question. You know, there's 400,000 registered Bexar County voters. And as this conversation unfolds, I think about all those voters that recently showed up to the polls to say hi to all the candidates and then walked out of there disappointed that they didn't see any of their preferred candidates on the ballot because they're Bexar County voters as opposed to City of San Antonio voters, right? They don't live within city limits. And they consider themselves to be San Antonians too, right? Now, I know that in order for this venue tax to be created, and we have to, get the buy-in of all Bexar County voters, but throughout this entire conversation about Project Marvel, I worry that we're not being intentional about speaking to those folks that believe they're San Antonians, but really are just Bexar County voters. And what is the plan, the engagement plan, to not just talk to the San Antonio voter, or the San Antonian, but to talk to everybody who has a stake in this, right? And I think that we need to start now to begin designing the outreach plan, right? Anyone?
I'm about to ask Lori to help me with this one.
For the community workshop discussion that I presented, that's going to start next week. Our first workshop is June 24th and 25th, but we are going to be distributing through social media, TV, working with each council district. I know D4 talked about doing flyers, handing out, leaning on our partners to help us distribute the information as well.
Who is that? Like just the county and the Spurs?
No, it could be, we've met with Unite here. We met with cops. We've met with neighborhood associations. We'll be having focus groups. You all, when we meet with you, are giving us groups that you think we should reach out to. And so we are also going to be reaching out to make sure that they can send that information to their constituents. So we are not just going to depend on Councilman Kaur to do a social media post. We're going to give her all the tools she needs to make sure that she can get out to her community and her constituents, and we're going to do the same. And through, like I said, our social media, through our partners' social media, not just the county and the city, because that is limiting. We want to make sure that we're working with those stakeholder groups who have individual stakeholders who have concerns or ideas they want to share.
So is that as the details start getting filled in, it's very clear that the city and the county need to continue working together to amplify that and have one message factually to the public, and I can tell you that we're committed to doing that. Ben and I met with the county manager earlier this week to kind of update them where we're at. They're going through their process. As that moves a little bit further down the road, I think it's going to be critical, to your point, to be able to explain to, no matter where you're at in the county, what the overall plan is.
And so, Lori, you did a masterful job at a town hall that I hosted, that we put together, and what we heard there was a lot of sincere mistrust for anything having to do with government and a new arena, because feelings are still hurt, right? I mean, 26, 27 years ago, representations were made, and people today feel like those were lies, right? And, they feel how they feel, right? And so now, more than ever, I think that we need to walk into this public engagement process understanding that sentiment of betrayal in certain pockets of this community, right? And then in other pockets, there's just, they'll tell you, I don't care. I was like, I really don't. Like, whether you have an arena or not, I never go to a Spurs game. I never go downtown. I never go to Hemisphere. And so, getting the disengaged stakeholder engaged, right, and explaining to them why this matters to them and the next generation of St. Antonians, I think requires a different strategy as well, right? And then, so I'm looking around the room, and we've got masterful messaging luminaries here. I mean, we got Trish DeBerry in the room, for goodness sake. We've got, the folks out at Metro SA, the Hispanic Chamber, and all of them attack these conversations from a different angle. And I think that it needs to be also, I think the public needs to know, when you say our partners, they need to know who those partners are, right? Because if they see their trusted broker of information on that list, then they'll say, okay, well, if they're included, I'm more likely to lean in, right? And so I don't know how to do that, because I've never done a project that requires this much heavy lifting to repair a brittle trust relationship that the public has with government. But this is not a, anyway, I don't envy your job, and I'm wondering what we have learned from other big projects that and what lessons we are bringing to this one to make sure we don't repeat those mistakes.
Like, I mean, the Alamo has, it has several renditions. But, one of the things that we learned is you put out a rendering and you get a lot of responses. And then some were good, some were bad. We reset, did different community engagement, and that's where, we really dove into those guiding principles, that when we come to this body for an action, you all remind us of those guiding principles and to ask us, how does this decision impact this guiding principle? And so we learned from, you just can't go and throw up renderings and not have a conversation. And that was a hard lesson to learn. It was a big lesson, but we did that. And we changed, and that was a great example of how we reset, we listened to the community, and we made a lot of changes. We've done that with the airport recently, too, the same thing with those guiding principles. I absolutely agree. When we were going through with you about the partners, when we were going through the rental rehab applications, I think Councilman Castillo was the one who brought this to it. People don't want to come to the city to get help on that rehab. They're going to go to a trusted partner. And so we had different partners in the community that people were going to, and those partners would help them do that application. And so that's why our meetings with you are so important, so you all can tell us in your community, who does your community trust? What are the partners that we need to engage? And also, what are the stakeholders that we need to meet with to really understand their perspective? Because if different districts are going to have different perspectives on this as well. For example, your town hall, it was a lot about the funding. Councilwoman Villagrán invited me to one of her meetings. It was all about park and ride. How do I get downtown? It needs to be reliable. So we're going to find out, what are the commonalities in each council district as well, so we can make sure we're addressing all of it. But it needs to be specific. We need to dig deep, get those partners, because we know that people aren't going to come to the city to get all the information. They're going to go to other partners and ask them, what do you think? What are you thinking about this? Are you going to support it? We want to make sure that we have the education out there to get that support.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Councilmember Pelaez. Go ahead, Eric.
I've mentioned it twice, but when you look at either our local history here or the other community benefits agreements, I mean, from my perspective, enforceability and reporting is going to have to be key. I mean, and there are real examples of those CBAs right now that it is hard to tell, after the announcement, what actually happened. And I think that those are important lessons, both our local history for previous efforts here. Right now, I think certainly the conversations you all have had, and from my perspective, that's going to have to be something that we better address, and that there not be any question when somebody years from now looks at what we did and wonder, is it enforceable? How do they update the public? Do they do regular reporting? How do they track it? What are the remedies? I think we're going to have to take a different approach. There's one or two examples of good public transparency in those other cities that we may want to copy, but I think we're going to have to spend time on that.
Councilmember White.
Thanks, Mayor. First, Councilwoman Aldrete Gavito could not be here today, and she's asked me to relay her comments. So this is from Councilwoman Aldrete Gavito. As this project develops, I strongly urge that we prioritize partnerships with companies that are locally headquartered. When we work with local businesses, we're not just building a district, we're reinvesting in our community and keeping dollars circulating here in our local community. Next, I'm pleased to see that community meetings are beginning around this project. That's a positive step. That said, we're starting in the red when it comes to public messaging. Residents have serious questions, and we need to meet them with answers. Transparency must be at the center of this process. Our residents deserve clear, consistent communication and meaningful opportunities to be heard. Also, in addition to transparency, I also want to emphasize that transportation continues to be a top priority for me as we consider this project. This district, at its core, is a quality of life project for the city. Locals should not have to contend with excessive traffic or parking challenges as a result of the new development. We need a modernized traffic management plan that includes smart design, public transit options, and pedestrian-friendly infrastructure, because congestion isn't just an inconvenience, it's a barrier. We need thoughtful planning that protects ease of mobility for everyone, first responders, nearby businesses, and locals, while supporting growth. Finally, I will end with my continued commitment to making this happen. We have a huge opportunity ahead of us, and I feel this is a positive step forward for us as a city in partnership with the county and the Spurs to up-level our community. That's from Councilwoman Aldrete Gavito. My thoughts on this really are as follows. I agree that this project has the potential to elevate San Antonio. The word transformational does get thrown around all too often, but this project, I would agree with my colleagues, really does have an opportunity to take San Antonio to where I know so many of us believe it can be. This is going to be nice if it gets done for big events, notoriety, etc. But mainly, I'm supportive of this project because of what it can do for our residents here in the city, their quality of life, how they would enjoy the district, and then, of course, the revenue that could be created from this project that would help with so many other needs that our city has. So I am pleased that we're here today and that we're continuing to explore if this project is viable. With that said, I'll tell you that I continue to be disappointed that we're sitting here at this point in time and still don't have hard and fast numbers on how we're going to pay for much of this project, and specifically the stadium, the Spurs Arena. We were told some time ago that the project was going to be somewhere between $1.2 and $1.5 billion, I think, for this arena. Yet we sit here today and haven't quite pinned down what portion the Spurs are going to pay for, what portion the city's going to pay for, what portion the county's going to pay for. I don't understand it, and I would continue to urge our team here at the city, the county, and the Spurs to act with some urgency. Let's get on the same page and let's get some hard and fast numbers. The citizens have a right to know where every dollar is going to come from for this project. Transparency is paramount, and they're going to be asked, I guess, potentially to vote in November. So time is running out. And when we talk about having these community meetings, what just has me up here shaking my head is the thought that we would go to these community meetings without all of the detail to give our residents, because that's what they've been asking for. So I'll ask you, Eric, the logic behind starting these workshops now.
Well, Councilman, we talked about the workshops or the community engagement aspect of this, specifically as we were dealing with the MOU earlier in the year with the county and the Spurs. And so it's a necessary step. I think it's a very important step as the council weighs in. I think it's really important to begin those post haste and ask residents or stakeholder groups, what they think. And the sooner we do that, I think the better. I think it's going to be an important process that you all will expect to see. I hear you loud and clear about the details, and we will continue to push to ascertain those commitments in advance of that. I think that's an important piece. I think there are going to be natural questions that are going to be asked, and we have to have an answer to that ultimately. And I think we're committed to continue to do that. The aspect of from the city's perspective of being the conduit of financing the developer is going to be important, and we're engaged completely with the Spurs and ready to hear what they may bring. But we'll push to do that and see if we can get that by the time we get there.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, because what I do not want, and because A, it's a waste of money, and B, it's a waste of time, is just check the box community meetings, right? Just to say we did it, because we do that all too often. And I hope that from these community meetings, we actually listen to the people. And I can't stop without saying that we do a budget survey every single year, right? We do the budget survey, and then we do these town hall meetings, right, coming up in August, et cetera, on the budget. And I never see, at least in the 2 years I've been here, anything in the budget change. So if we're going to do these community meetings, if we're going to talk to the people, if we're going to spend the time and money to do that, let's listen to the people and incorporate their thoughts and their desires into our plan, because after all, it's their money. And speaking of the people, the debt, right? We heard it all campaign season long, all of us up here. The debt that is accumulating, there's a real worry in the community about this debt. I'll tell you that we went into, per Texas Public Policy Foundation, In 2016, we went in with a debt of 2015, we went in with a debt of $11,407 a person here in our region, and as we sit here today, it's somewhere just north of $14,209. The debt is accumulating on our people. Our people are rightly concerned about it, and if we're going to start taking on more debt to pay for projects like this, we have to clearly lay out for the citizens what we're doing before they get an opportunity to vote on it, because they deserve to vote on it with all the information. Eric, I also sent you a memo about a week or so ago on a public safety impact analysis, and I know it was only a week ago, but I do want to mention that and say that I hope as we move forward with the planning of the proposed project that we take into account how we're going to keep everybody safe in and around this district. So with that, I will end again by saying that I am supportive of the project and seeing if we can make this work in a fiscally responsible manner. The Spurs, the county, and the city, I'll say it again, need to act with more urgency and more transparency. If we do it, I'm really optimistic we can get to a place where everybody's going to win, right? The city's going to win, the county's going to win, but most importantly, the people that are out there in the neighborhoods, in the apartments, in the townhomes, the residents of San Antonio need to be the big winners here if this is something that this body is going to push forward and make successful. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember White. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, can I address a couple of the points that the councilman made? Number one, starting backwards. Yeah, you heard Ben mention on the term sheet that part of those aspects of the public safety access and traffic are all important parts that still need to be worked out, and I appreciate the memo a week or so ago about that. But that is a necessary part of work that needs to be done and will go throughout design and construction. It's just not a plan, and those are things that we build in now. Secondly, you're right, Councilman, issuing debt is important, and that's why Ben emphasized in his presentation those developer guarantees and what they look like are going to be critical, and they're a necessary step because we are going to manage our risk, and we are not going to I likely will not recommend to the council something that is beyond something that is taking on too much risk, and so that's critical. So I appreciate you supporting that. Thirdly, the Texas Public Policy analysis. When they do that analysis, they take into account public entities here in San Antonio, which happen to include our electric and wastewater utility, and they compare it to cities like Dallas that don't have those. They're a private sector, so it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, and I think overall the city has managed its debt. We do so with no increase to tax rate, at least we historically have done that. Don't anticipate that changing, and I think that's an important part that sets us apart from practically every other major city in this state. And then lastly, every community engagement process we go through is meant to gather that input, utilize it at the staff level, and provide the report to you all, the mayor and council. It's not just us spending money and y'all's time and the public's time for a day and a half to ask a question, whether it's on this project or the budget. Ultimately, that's feedback that we catalog and give back to you all to make to receive as feedback on potential changes on whatever we're doing. But I don't want you all, as mayor and council, the public that may be watching Channel 21, to think that we're just going to go through a process that we already know the answers to. I mean, obviously from the presentation, we don't have all the answers, and I've given a number of presentations. I have found that they're critical to be able to explain the actual situation. But more importantly to me, and I think we'll see this, is to hear back from the community. And there's a variety of feedback. And generally, we're hearing from the fringes. Either this should have been done 3 years ago, or no way. And I think spending the time, I think Able City has come up with a fantastic plan that is unlike anything else that we've done before, probably more like the TOD process we went through. And it's a necessary step. And so I plan on being personally engaged in those. And I know many of you all are going to be there because I think it's an important step. So thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Eric. Councilmember Courage.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, this may be the last time I get to talk on a significant issue on the dais here, and I think this is a very significant issue. I want to say that I'm very supportive of the Spurs. I want them to stay in San Antonio. I want us all to enjoy them as we have for 30 years, 40 years. However, I'm concerned about this project and the way it's going right now. Eric, at the beginning, you gave us a cost estimate in your opening remarks. Could you remind us of what that was?
The cost estimate of?
Project Marvel, and I think you said it was a certain amount.
No, sir, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, Ben had a slide at the beginning, the table that has all the aspects he talked about, the convention center,
Right. Do we know what that number was?
$750 million.
No, that was just for the Spurs Arena. I meant the whole project. Okay, let me just move on. I'm concerned about the cost, but also when does the Spurs lease expire? And what is the projected opening of a new Spurs Arena according to the plans we're looking at right now? Who can tell me that?
So the Spurs agreement with the county expires in 2032.
Okay.
And I would say until we have major components filled in on that slide Ben showed you, I would, that would drive the opening date.
Well, you know, I've heard they want it open by 2028 or something like that, which is a little over 3 years away, et cetera. And I'm just thinking, you know, they've got more time than that, and it seems to me that we have a lot more to consider, and the way we're moving on this concerns me. For example, you know, we're talking about doing more planning when it comes to traffic and lights and bridges and garages. That's a lot of planning that needs to be done just to go ahead and have people move around this facility. We've talked about VIA being part of this. We've talked about TxDOT being part of this. We've been talking with TxDOT about redoing a lot of what goes on right now around 37 and the arena and putting in all kinds of new lanes and this and that. Do we have any idea of if TxDOT has the money to do that, or when they'll have the money to do that? And, you know, how will that impact the timeline for moving this stuff forward?
Well, Tom mentioned this, Councilman. We've had coordinating meetings with TxDOT. There were a number of the projects that Tom talked about are TxDOT related. In our cost estimate, typically in the state, for projects like that involve TxDOT, the local government pays 20% and TxDOT pays 80%.
Well, that's if it's funded.
If it's
and
funded,
they need to get funded to prove it.
And that's the second part of what I was going to say, that is making sure that we work through the TxDOT process to be able to ensure that the other 80% is funded.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about a couple of bonds. For example, the county wants to do a venue tax county bond, right? And so they want to go ahead and do a bond election. Is that correct?
That's the process that they're going
Right.
through.
And if that fails, then how do we move forward? Okay, maybe you don't have an answer. I understand that. You also talked about an infrastructure and possible housing bond issue this year that the city would put forward that would impact Project Marvel, didn't you?
Yes, that's the 200.
And what if that fails? Okay,
Well,
so
then it doesn't
we've
get
really,
done,
it's not just
Councilman.
one bond that we hope gets passed to move this stuff forward.
Correct.
It's really two. And the people of San Antonio need to improve both of those, and the county voters need to approve at least one of those. And I don't see any way that talking to people in June or particularly July or August is going to help 150, well, I take that back, 1.5 million people in San Antonio or 2.2 million people in Bexar County understand all of the intricacies of these when we don't even have the details. We can't tell them what these actual costs are going to be. We're only going to estimate, and I'll tell you what, my experience has been that everything always costs a lot more than you anticipate it's going to cost when you start. And I think that's been one of the criticisms about city governments getting involved in building arenas or stadiums, that the city's contribution does not repay as much as what goes into it, getting a return out of it. I'm not saying that we wouldn't. I'm just saying that's been the history that people have found, depending on how invested the city is in this. Now, I know the city is only a partial investor, okay? And we're talking about that investment being to improve the convention center and the arena and support work around the structure and the transportation and infrastructure costs, but not building the arena and things of that nature. But still, that's a big investment by us. And if those bonds don't pass, we're not going anywhere. And why I'm saying this is I just believe we are moving too fast and we don't have enough information to really educate the population where we will get a good turnout and a positive vote of support. And if the Spurs don't have to move out until 32, I mean, that's 6-7 years from now. Why do we have to move it so fast right now when we really don't have enough information to, I think, properly educate and motivate the voters to approve it? Now, we've had a lot of things go forward in the past, and they were pushed very quickly, and you know what? Voters did vote for them, but with regret later on when they found out they didn't know half of what they needed to know. For example, Frost Bank Center. I don't want to see that happen this time. And you're asking this council to move quickly, and right now, we've got at least 5 new council members and a brand new mayor coming on board who's going to have their own agenda and has no experience in city government or how it works or how it's supposed to work. And over the next few months, the #1 job of every council that I've been on for 8 years has been the budget and putting together a reasonable budget. And right now, we're facing serious budget woes. We're looking at a shrinking revenue. We're looking at possible, maybe probable cuts to this year's budget and the one after that. There are changes going on in military missions which could cost us thousands of jobs here in San Antonio. We've got possible further federal and state revenue cuts and grants. We're already hearing food and nutrition money's getting cut back to people in our city. Healthcare money's being cut back to people in our city. How do we as a city handle those items with our next budget when we're focusing or asking the public to focus a lot of attention on Project Marvel and the Spurs Arena? You know, we've got continuing climate concerns affecting water and energy use issues in this city. It's not getting cooler. It's not raining more. God bless it, rained a lot last month. And energy costs. We're hearing we need to expand energy because we've got big data centers moving in that want to use our energy. And we need more affordable housing for people. Those are issues that this next council needs to address. I'm not saying we don't need to address Project Marvel or that we don't need to address a new Spurs Arena, but I think we're compressing it too much, and we're not giving enough time to get the details to make a reasonable presentation and decision to the voters, or for this council or the next council to make a reasonable decision in the next few months. And without that, we may see one or both of those bond issues fail, and then we're nowhere. So those are my comments, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Courage. I'll just interject because I feel this tension right now with respect to where we are in the project timeline and you know, the need to get answers as quickly as possible. This is how public process works. And the reality is, in order for us to arrive at these answers and be transparent at the same time, we're going to have some of these debates out in the open, which is what we should be doing. But if the specter of failure to reach our highest aspirations were going to stop us in our tracks from even trying, I think we're falling short of our citizens' expectations of improving our city on any aspect. We wouldn't have started a housing process. We wouldn't have started down the path of bringing mass transit here. We wouldn't have started to invest in education in our city. These processes, by their nature, are messy. What you're hearing today is the due diligence that has been required coming together, as well as the demands for a public process at the same time. I am fully confident that by the time we were to go to voters to ask if they agree with certain propositions, that we will have, as we always have had, our ducks in a row with the city's position. And I'll just say again, it really doesn't matter who's up here. The city and its need to improve on a lot of aspects of life doesn't wait for council members or mayors to advance along the learning curve. This city is continuing to move forward regardless of whether we're prepared or not. What I applaud is that the city, its partners with the Spurs, the county, the folks who you have heard presentations from are committed and are doing a good job getting the answers that we need to make an informed decision as we go forward. I'll turn it now to Councilmember McHugh Rodriguez.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. I do want to say first, I guess, is that things have gone almost exactly as I said they would when we had our early conversations regarding public perception of all of this, regarding creating the renderings and showing those and people feeling like this was a done deal. Things have gone almost exactly as I said, and so I really hope that people are taking all of our comments to city leadership, mayor, I hope, and those who may become mayor, I hope that you're all listening and thinking critically about the decisions that we make on the dais. I'm going to reiterate a few things I've said in our previous public meetings about Project Marvel. And one is that, of course, we all want to live in a San Antonio that is vibrant, that is a place where people can live, they can work, and they can play, where San Antonians work good jobs with strong benefits and good wages. They can pay their bills, they can start a family and live a life filled with joy and fulfillment. We want San Antonio to be a place where people from all over the world have added San Antonio to their bucket list, and they finally make a plan to check it off of their list. And in achieving these goals, I know that we haven't been measured in our approach thus far for decades. Almost a fifth of our residents are living in poverty. More than half of them are kids. More than half of them are women and girls. And almost a quarter of those people living in poverty are Black, despite making up less than 7% of the total population. Then let's say that these folks are driving to school and work. 34% of our city's roads are rated C, D, or F. Traditional grading system, C, D, or F. 34% of our city's roads. So they're living in poverty. Then they're likely driving on poorly maintained roads. If they're not driving a car, they're riding a bus that could take 30 minutes or more to pick them up, and they're waiting at a bus stop with no shade in 100-degree weather. They end their work or school day, head back home, and then they have to cook a meal that they left the district to get ingredients for, or they accepted the subpar ingredients from the substandard H-E-B in their neighborhood or the dollar store in their neighborhood, or they'll go to Popeyes, McDonald's, or Whataburger because they live in a food desert and access to affordable quality produce is inaccessible. Then they breathe in the polluted air in their community because on every corner is a warehouse, a manufacturing plant, or a porta potty cleaning facility. Then as they age, they have little access to medical care as they have their entire life because they're also in a medical care desert. Surely the only thing that would be, that would add to it all is if they're walking to their mailbox and they get mauled by a dangerous dog that ACS couldn't pick up because they only have the capacity to respond to 82% of critical calls. We have so much need, and this is what we've heard over the past several months and for a very, very long time, and that's top of mind for residents right now. It's challenging to convey why so many of our creative resources went to the planning of a downtown sports district that many residents either won't be able to afford to enjoy or won't live the kind of lifestyle that allows them to do so, when time after time they're told that their needs, there's not enough resources to meet them. And I can see the benefit in most of these projects. I want to, again, measure, considered. I want to be measured in the approach, and I can see the benefit. But there is a lack of confidence right now that we need to overcome. A thriving Alamo Dome and Convention Center and even an arena will help provide stability, or could provide stability, to many of the downtown hospitality and service jobs. But we need to be assured that if we invest now, especially at the level that we're looking to, it needs to truly be competitive, and we can't find ourselves in the same position we're in now in 15 years. Will we have the ability to attract stadium acts that rival Houston and Austin? Is that ever going to be the case? Will we be able to meet the growth of the largest conventions we hope to attract long term? Maybe 10 years from now, we're going to open up a convention center that meets the largest convention need right now, but are they going to continue growing to a point where we still won't meet them when this convention center is open? If they grow, will they outgrow us eventually again? I'd also want to know, how will we bake into these projects and agreements a livable wage for all impacted employees? How do we ensure that the people who work at the hotels and any of these venues benefit from these projects in a meaningful way? So I'd advise that there would be a stakeholder group specifically for existing workers to advise on the benefits agreement. I heard Councilwoman Cabello-Haverton make that same, or a very similar request. I don't much care for the courthouse project, but for any of the venues that we create, we have an obligation to make sure that we're not competing with the Frost Bank Center or the Freeman Coliseum, especially for graduations and smaller concerts and events. The project that I've been most excited for, the Land Bridge project, is probably the least attainable project to fund, and it's important that we don't lose sight of the damage that has been done by infrastructure such as highways and train tracks, which were designed to segregate communities. And so this project always needs to be top of mind, even if it is difficult and challenging, or extremely challenging for us to find funding for it. Lastly, the Spurs Arena has a challenge, because when people say that they're opposed to Project Marvel, they mean they're opposed to the arena. That's the vast majority of people that we've spoken to. And if voters are asked to finance this project in November, there will be a challenging road ahead if the Spurs don't carry their weight in a number of ways. They need to build, they need to do a few things, right? So one, they need to build goodwill with the community, and to me that begs the question of how will they participate in addressing the needs that I expressed earlier, whether it's infrastructure, affordable housing, animal care services, transportation, all of it. How will they meaningfully contribute to these things that are top of mind for our constituents, the people who are going to have to live next to these facilities or live next to one of the facilities that has been abandoned? We could do, and I'll bring the point up, we could do a housing bond or an infrastructure bond on our own, just as they could fund an arena on their own. So I would also ask how much of our city resources so far, including staff time, have been spent trying to make this work for the Spurs. And so, all of that, the question of how will the Spurs contribute to our city and to a stronger relationships with our residents in a way that's proportionate to the ask for a $1.4 billion arena, equates to what benefits can our community expect to gain if not for their investment in the arena. Which of these things could we not do if we don't have this arena, if we don't have any of these projects? And that's what we need to be selling people on, not something that we could do on our own. We could fund things with TERS, we can do a housing bond, we could do an infrastructure bond, we can fix people's infrastructure. But the Spurs need to share that burden. And after the community meetings, I'd like for us to discuss the community's feedback, and really only then do I feel is an appropriate time to get into the weeds of a community benefits agreement. I think we're gonna hear a lot of things in various districts that are gonna be different, and I think we're gonna have to find a balance, and hopefully those inform the conversations that we have out here and the conversations that we have in exec. And lastly, I've been thinking a lot about the ask for the county's investment in the arena. And quite honestly, if the county is going to ask voters to approve funding through a venue tax, I think it needs to stay with the Frost Bank Center and the surrounding area. The Spurs are leaving, and I've gotten no indication that they intend to leave it any better than they found it. The only entity talking about investing in the east side is the county right now. We aren't even talking about how we're going to improve the east side and the area around the Frost Bank Center, and that needs to be pivotal to, that needs to be, I don't know how to use the word pivotal. It needs to be a central part of that conversation. I want to share, before I end, I want to share some quotes from an old newspaper article. In October of 2002, San Antonio Spurs chairman Peter Holt said, "I don't want people 10 years from now to look at this area as underserved." And then Spurs vice president at the time, Leo Gomez, said about development around the SBC Center, now the Frost Bank Center, "It will take time. We're not looking for something quick. We're looking for something sustainable. We need to sort things out and do it right." In November 2008, 6 years later, the county and Spurs put $50,000 apiece toward planning efforts around the arena. Leo Gomez said at the time, "All of us are looking at this as a potential catalyst for development out there." Of course, out there meaning the east side. And I can tell you 23 years after that first quote I shared, the east side is still underserved, still under-resourced, and still marginalized. And if the Spurs want to leave, as has been indicated, they need to play a much larger role in supporting the area, the arena, all of it. And again, the rodeo is not going to be it, and taking a portion of the only dollars available to supporting the east side is probably not it either. So I offer my feedback. Hopefully you find it measured and considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McHugh Rodriguez. Councilmember Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone, for the presentation. It bears repeating that I do not feel comfortable supporting any project or initiative of using public dollars to invest in private interest. And while I value the work that you all have laid out in the presentation, as folks have mentioned, there aren't any hard numbers associated with the framework laid out. For example, in terms of the arena lease, do we have a general idea in which how much we would be receiving from the arena lease?
No, ma'am, that's still under negotiation.
For the private development ground leases, do we have a general idea of how much we would intend to receive from those leases?
What I'll say, Councilwoman, is we have modeled, we've run a lot of mathematical models. What we need to do is get to a point where we have a developer at the table where we can start to firm those numbers up. That will then drive the level of city's contribution.
And in terms of the Spurs contribution, do we have a general idea of percentage in conversation what they're willing to contribute?
And the overall cost to the arena?
Yes.
No, ma'am.
Yes. So, you know, again, it's hard for me to bust out the pom-poms like some of my colleagues have when we don't have any clear financial framework of where we intend to invest in the dollars. And, you know, folks have mentioned, you know, the general obligation bond. It's my understanding that we typically pledge those bonds with the ad valorem tax. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And those are typically backed by the general fund, correct?
Not backed by the general fund, so when you all set the tax rate, property tax rate, as part of the budget process, you set it in two components. One is to support the general fund. One is to support our debt service, our general obligation bonds, our property tax supported debt. As Eric mentioned, what we're modeling and what the scenarios and assumptions we make are that there'll be no increase, no projected increase in the property tax rate. We haven't changed it since 2004.
If I may reframe my question, bonds are pledged with ad valorem property taxes, correct?
General obligation bonds, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for that. Those are my questions for you, Ben. But to that point, right, we talk about no general fund dollars, but whether it's a housing bond or a general obligation bond, you know, these are ultimately going to be general fund dollars. And if we don't have commitments in terms of private development ground leases, and or if we do and those fall through, it's San Antonio taxpayers that are on the hook for those general obligation bonds. And again, I don't feel comfortable given that we haven't seen a stiff framework in terms of how much we anticipate to spend or we expect from partners and or private investment, especially when, right, we've been presented that we're going to be facing a $224 million deficit by the fall of 2029. You know, like some of my colleagues have expressed, right, I would like the Spurs to stay. But who I'd also like to stay is a constituent I met at the Hope Center who shared that she may have to move to Houston to live with her daughter because her rent's getting too high. who's a priority to stay in San Antonio is a young couple who is cruising the historic West Side and want to move into the West Side, but they're concerned about the lack of basic infrastructure. And that's my priority, who I believe this body and city leadership should prioritize and have aspirations in terms of how do we improve their quality of life. In terms of aspirations, right, we're talking about how aspirational and catalytic this project could be, but I think based off of the public input process after budget survey that has highlighted the need for affordable housing, homeless services, and we know what goes hand in hand with that is increasing livable wages here in San Antonio. So when we talk about the input that we've already garnered from community, that should set the direction of our priorities as a council, especially when we're encouraging and preparing the public to tighten the belt because we're going to have to start staggering spending. In terms of the hot tax and that earmark for Project Marvel, will this in any way impact arts funding? And again, right now we're having conversations, we're seeing many nonprofits have their donors roll back funding, and they're also having to tighten their belt. Will this impact arts funding? And if not, I also see an opportunity for us to support our arts community with the hot tax even further. So the question is, can we anticipate the arts community, the arts department, receiving more or less in terms of their hot tax?
So, Councilman, as we've worked on this, so today, the hot tax funds Visit San Antonio, Arts, History and Preservation, helps fund our facilities, Convention Center, Alamo Dome, and then it pays for debt service on the Convention Center. What we have modeled and what we have worked on is that as the hot tax grows, all of those things grow. So we built in growth not only to cover debt service on these future obligations, we have built in the same level of growth for arts, for history and preservation, for the facilities, so we have built all that in.
Okay, and I asked that question because as we navigate the budget process, I know there's a need to support our arts community, and if we have the flexibility to support Project Marvel through the hot tax, then I believe we have the capacity to support our arts department and our arts nonprofits. But I believe last week or a couple of weeks ago, there was a press conference regarding Project Marvel, and a question was asked in terms of how much the stadium would add to Project Marvel, and if it made a big difference in the total cost. And there was a response given that stated that this is something that the city had planned to do anyway because of the Hemisphere plan that was passed in 2012. I've reviewed the 2012 plan, and there's no mention of a land bridge, a UTSA hospitality center, or moving the cooling plant. And if there's a specific page that you could direct me to, I'd appreciate that. There is page 83 that mentions the courthouse, but it's in terms and related to parking, not necessarily a music venue or a venue. So I think it's just, send me the pages if y'all have them, because I would hate to believe that folks are being misled in terms of this is something that was voted and approved with funding tied to it. When skimming the plan, I didn't see that included.
Councilman, I can answer that question. You're not going to find a page number in there. But the answer to that question was related to development along the eastern side of Hemisphere Park, which has not been done. That was a specific conversation. The concept of the Wood Courthouse being an event center, certainly the conversation we're having today about an NBA arena where the Institute of Arts and Cultures was not contemplated nor included in the strategic plan back 10 or 12 years ago when it was done.
Okay, and then in terms of the community benefits agreement, I appreciate the research that your team has done on that and exploring different initiatives throughout the city. Of course, they do vary because they're community driven. Each community is very different. But a couple of the expectations and trends that I've seen are in terms, and I've mentioned when we went through the MOU process where fair wages scaled to living wage for the city of San Antonio, of course, adjusted to represent the city of San Antonio, full-time jobs, city jobs with no ability to get temps, free and fair to join a union, local contracting, free transportation for workers, money for higher education, as you all outlined within y'all's bullet presentation. I do value that y'all have met with Unite Here. I know I recommended that you all convene with them to talk about how they will be impacted with this project. So thank y'all for taking that initiative. And then, of course, ensuring that there's an affordability housing component tied to this. And to the point that you raised, or the direction that you're seeking, Erica, I would be supportive of a housing bond sooner than later, and of course, much higher than the last bond that we recently initiated and voters approved. I think this is something that we should be doing whether there's a Project Marvel or not. It's something that, again, going back to the public input process that San Antonians are saying is a need for us to invest in. You know, I do have a couple of questions in terms of the renderings and graphics and how much we've paid so far in terms of Pape Dawson's work. If offline, if y'all don't have that now, I'd like to see, you know, what those costs look like. And then, can you remind me, was there an RFP process? Did that go out in terms, and then how many respondents did we get back and folks interested in taking on this work?
We'll get that to you, Councilwoman.
Okay. Lastly, I'm grateful to see VIA has been included in this process, right? I think they go hand in hand, and I see the conversation about parking lots throughout the city a little in conflict with the city's goals. But you know, as John mentioned, right, it's getting more cars off the road, more folks in buses to navigate not just downtown, but all throughout the city of San Antonio. So just grateful for the work that you are doing, the input and the direction that you are providing, because again, you know, a concern that one of my colleagues brought up, and it's why I signed his CCR, is in conversation with the 76ers arena, that discussion, there was a huge concern about EMS getting to and from hospitals. And what my district borders and District 1 has is the Children's Hospital, Baptist Hospital, and I have a very great concern just how that may impact EMS time and ultimately lives with such congestion and without a plan. But again, I do see that within the presentation, you all are exploring that traffic plan, but it is a huge concern and it should be a priority for all of us. So thank you, Councilman White, for initiating that council consideration request to make sure that we start researching and navigating that piece. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Castillo. Councilmember Kaur.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to welcome Councilmember Munguia to the dais for the first time. Excited to have you here. And thank you all to everyone that's here presenting and the folks that have stayed. I feel like we all need to take a stretch break. But just wanted to start off by saying I'm actually very excited for this community engagement plan. I know some of my colleagues mentioned, why are we doing this? We don't have all the answers. But I have been saying, and I've learned, that we should have actually started this a long time ago, and I think Eric mentioned that community engagement should have been done even before renderings were built, but I'm glad that we have it now. So, and I'm particularly glad that we have a group that's done this before in previous projects and has had success. I think what was mentioned was that community engagement has to be real. There has to be a feedback loop, and it has to include a diverse group of stakeholders. And in talking with Able Cities leadership, I believe that is going to happen. Some of the groups that in District 1 we've particularly highlighted are the Hemisphere businesses right now, the folks that have created all of that, all of the growth there need to be included in the conversation. The neighborhood associations, obviously, each of them are a stakeholder group that need to be discussed and conversed with. La Villita, all of the surrounding groups there that are the vendors there that will potentially benefit from this. Each of those needs to have a separate conversation and understanding of what their priorities are to move that forward. So one of the things, and I also wanted to commend Councilwoman Cabello-Harvard, as mentioned, about including the employees right now that need to be discussed with too, because I think that's really important. I just wanted to see if, Mario, if you could come up for just a quick second to talk about some of the work that you've done at Alazan and just give a brief overview of what it is that you were able to accomplish, and how does a resident know that the work if they show up to these two-day meetings, that something's actually going to come of it?
What are they going to experience? Sure, of course. Thank you, Mario Peña with Able City. I guess to start that, I want to share one of our first conversations I had with City Manager Eric Walsh. You know, he called me, and I wasn't involved in the project at all, and I was maybe just as concerned that I had seen, I think, what everyone else had seen. So my perspective was very much from the outside in, and I asked him two key questions that we ask our potential community engagement project clients. Number one, is there room to change and influence, right? Is it too late? Because the renderings are beautiful, and the work you've done and the professionality up to this point leads many people to believe that a lot of decisions have already been made. So that was my concern. And so I said, are you sure we've got room to do this? And is it actually going to be genuine community engagement? And then two, so one is it too late? And then two, is it too cooked? And then two, is there room for actual influence, right, from the public? And so I needed to hear yes, right, on those two for Able City to actually say, we can do a good job here for you all to hear from your constituents. So hearing that, the next thing I said is, well, we have to start right away. And so the right away is this summer. You all have some key decisions to be made in August and in the fall. To sort of respond to Councilman Mark White's point earlier, some of the answers aren't here, and there's a lot of people here that are working really hard to get more answers, but I'd rather get the public to give them some guidance from this point forward as they walk into negotiation tables, as they walk in to create some of the key decision making they have to make for us. They're there with community feedback in hand, and so we're going all across the city, with our community planning workshops and spending some real time, right, at each district. So 2 full days, we move in, we embed ourselves into each district, and so people can come in many different formats if they want to have a pointed conversation about housing, about key topics. There's room for that. There's a big community forum where people can come in and give us we're starting with give us your concerns, right? There's an opportunity to come in, have some really fun urban planning conversations around the map, but we realize it's early on, and we realize that we're there to answer questions and to hear concerns and to hear big ideas. There's a lot of big ideas, I think, from across the community that we want to convey to you all.
That's great. Thank you so much. I just wanted to share that one of the things also we've heard is it's in the summer, people can't get engaged, but they can still, there's going to be virtual options, at least in the District 1 community engagement session, so if folks are traveling, and there's going to be a survey in addition. So I think that at least we're starting to hear, because right now we've not gotten any community input. So this would be our first time even hearing. And so in July, I'm looking forward to seeing some guiding principles that we can actually hold our housing bond to, because I don't think this body can make any decision moving forward without community input. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. That's
sure,
great.
Of course. Yeah, thank you.
And then a couple of questions on just the overall plan. Also wanted to recognize that Mario's here. Congratulations on your position at Visit SA. I would love for you to work with, it's just an open request for you to work with city staff to really think about the $900 million that this convention center is being invested at, to see if it really meets the ROI. We've been doing some research and listening to folks, and we want to make sure that if we are investing that much money, are we really going to be able to target groups that are currently not looking at San Antonio? Or is it a better strategy to double down on already the folks, the mid-sized convention markets that are already being attracted? And would the investment in and around the convention center be able to fill it even more? So I'd love for you guys to just think about what is the real ROI that we're going to get from that convention center investment. And then transportation. Thank you, Vera, for being here. I want to echo Councilman Castillo's comments. Transportation is really important, and I do think that the more we create opportunities for folks to use VIA in a structured, frequent way, the more folks are going to be able to buy into it. I think because we haven't invested in it, people don't see that it's valuable. So I'm hoping that with the Green Line investments and us working together on the advisory group for the Green Line construction plan, that folks will start actually using it more frequently to come downtown to these events. But along that phase, Tom, I have a couple of quick questions for you. There was a mention of a garage on the south part of the Alamo Dome lot. What is the expected size of that garage?
2,500 cars.
Okay, there was a rumor that it was a lot higher than that.
We actually had considered bigger garages, but that's really the size that really fits well there.
And how long would it take to leave from a 2,500 person or 2,500 car garage?
Well, we proposed that ramp to go to the main lanes of 37, and it's ultimately going to depend on the design of the garage and where we can run the traffic out. But you get 750 to 1,000 cars per hour per lane, and so 2,500 cars. If we have like 4 lanes, that garage should dump pretty quickly.
Okay. And I just want to make sure that whenever we're doing, because my understanding was we were doing multiple garages with last mile transportation, like the local that we have to get people to and from. Is that still the idea with the parking plan at least?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then if we can bring up slide 27, you mentioned this safe and walkable neighborhoods. And I just want to make sure, I'm echoing, I know Eric said that there's going to be neighborhood plans taken into place, but I just want to make sure that the slide that you showed there actually right now it cuts off at Cesar Chavez. And I would love for this slide to be extended all the way down to 235. That means what are the street improvements that are going to come up? And this should be something that in our neighborhood stakeholder groups, they get to actually say, because they've already given me a list of where they want four-way stop signs, where they want street lights. Literally, I have 3 intersections that need crosswalk, signalized crosswalks, and I can tell them to you right now. But I would love for them to tell to the folks leading the community engagement so that this plan can go all the way down. And that's the only way I think we would feel comfortable moving forward with an infrastructure bond, because I understand that may not seem as the major infrastructure that's mentioned here already, but it is to our residents, and so that's really important. So I just wanted to echo that.
Okay.
And then lastly, on the finance plan, and that's it, thanks, Tom. On the finance plan, have we looked at so I know Councilman Castillo already mentioned that we don't have a fixed number for the ground lease. What would it look like if we ground leased the building and didn't ground leased the stadium and didn't use Midtown TERS? Is that even an option for us to not use Midtown TERS to purchase that land?
So if we didn't use the Midtown TERS to purchase the land, that would impact our ability to leverage the ground lease on the arena to get to a more meaningful number on the arena contribution. I'd have to
Okay.
get that money from somewhere else.
Okay. I would love for, in the community engagement sessions, to actually discuss this too, because this is the portion that I know the folks that live in and around Midtown really want to understand better, is where would those dollars be going to otherwise if it weren't be going to purchasing this? And without a stadium, would we still use those dollars to go purchase that land, to get ownership of that? So I'd love for that to be a discussion question that's asked. But in addition, when you're doing modeling, are we using different types of leases, so like percentage leases, et cetera, to see what would get us to the amount that we need?
So at this point, we are focused on the ground lease for the arena building itself, as well as the level of private development and the revenue guarantees we would get off of that. Those are the 2 biggest drivers we have in that model right now. I think those are going to yield us the most value towards a meaningful contribution to the arena.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mayor. Well done.
Thank you, Councilmember Kaur. Councilmember Munguia.
Thank you very much. Can someone tell me what the financing looked like for the Alamo Dome when it was constructed?
So the Alamo Dome was paid for with the half-cent sales tax. There were some certificates of obligation that were issued early on, but they were paid off very quickly. I think that the dome was paid for in, I want to say 5 years, on ballparking.
And there was no private financing involved?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
And Councilman, the sales tax increment was an item that was approved by the voters.
Gotcha, yeah. So I think it's important to note that, how far that's come from 100% public financing to the discussion we're having today. And so I want to thank the Spurs for at least being involved in that and changing at least how we are financing these new types of stadiums. So I did a little bit of background, and I found an Alamo Dome neighborhood plan that was actually passed by City Council when I was 2 months old. And it had a lot of, it's 97 pages. It has a lot of recommendations. It talked a lot to stakeholders on the east side, business community, and so they talked about, neighborhood parking decals, parking lots, mass transit, Robert Thompson Center. So a lot of what we talked about today was already in that plan. I'm curious to see how much of that has actually been fulfilled, seen through, what's still lacking. They talked about a grocery store in that area, and so I'd like to do a little deeper dive on how this is going to be different. I'm hoping that with the CBA, it will actually have some codified measures to make sure those things happen, but very curious about that. And then when it comes to the CBA, I can tell you what I like, right? Union jobs, good, strong wages, low-income access, for low-income families. But I do think it has to have a lot more community input into that process. So far, it hasn't really happened yet. So when I was knocking on doors, of all the doors I knocked on, I probably had 2 residents talk to me about the Spurs Arena, and they thought that was Project Marvel in its entirety, right? So there's a lot more engagement that needs to be done, especially in District 4. And when it comes to that, a lot of residents in D4 are going to ask, what about us and what about our side of town? So for VIA, there's a question on the Kell-Lack Center. So if we can go to that slide with the mapping of the transit centers. I don't recall the slide number, but it has the map of all the VIA lines.
The transit centers, yeah.
Yeah. So, the neighborhood in District 4 actually has advocated previously, I think it's another slide than that, the Kell-Lack Center expansion. And so I don't think that's an actual classified park and ride station. I believe it's a transit center.
Yeah, it's a transit center. It's not a park and ride. What I was saying is these are opportunities. These are transit centers we own where we can access park and ride. With Kell-Lack, there's there's actually a couple of adjacent parking lots owned by private retail centers where we would initiate a lease agreement with those folks so that we can do a park and ride from there.
Yeah, so we would love to see that in District 4, but I know in the past that's been looked into and the owner is not willing to lease at all to us. So that was something I'd be interested in, especially at the Model S Center. So, getting D4 residents there with public transportation is really important, especially when it comes to traffic. So we could, do some more. I'm sure you're still looking into all that.
Absolutely. That's one of the anchors for the Silver Line. So we're going to have service continuing there. So, we're equally as interested as you in really building that transit center.
No, that's great. Thank you. And do you have a timeline on the decision-making process for City Council?
We have a fair amount of work to do, and I think it's obvious that we have we're going to have a new mayor and a handful of new council members on the dais. So I think this is going to be obviously need to be discussed with the final team that gets selected. The timeline that we're working on, given what we've done so far, Councilman, is the community engagement through starting at the end of this month and early July. In the back of my mind, depending on the final mayor and council team prepared for maybe another public conversation at the end of this month. I do know that the county next week at Commissioners Court will be discussing a potential resolution on a venue tax, and it's a necessary step. They've got to go through the Texas Comptroller's Office. I am contemplating and internally being prepared to be able to provide a report to the council by mid-July, third week in July, on community engagement and a number of the infrastructure aspects. If there is something placed on the ballot, it's got to be done by August 18th. We are proposing our budget on August 14th. So in my mind, that should be an early August conversation, because to Councilman Courage's point, we'll have other things that we're dealing with. But all that is really up in the air. That's my internal timeline, really based on the council conversation so far, and recognizing that we're going to have some new members on the dais here shortly.
Okay, great. And I had the question on the intersection, the SPUI, I think someone called it a SPUI intersection. Can we go back to that slide? It looks like a very daunting intersection. Does that back up to, that's on Cesar Chavez?
It's what the image, the better image would be the rendering that was probably 26. Oh, sorry. The better image is probably the rendering, but it's in the current location of the existing intersection. Is that your question?
Yeah, and it is Cesar Chavez?
It is Cesar
okay.
Chavez.
So is that intersection right there where it bridges over the railroad track?
The continue.
Councilman, I think what you're seeing here is that the main lanes of 37 have been removed just for visibility to the lower lane. So the visual is a little deceiving in that way. So 37 would run over the top of the image you see here. The SPUI is underneath the interstate there. So
Okay. And you can't get rid of 37?
No, sir.
Or we can jump.
Right, okay. Thank you for clarifying that question. And just real quick, when it comes to the housing bond, I do support having that on the ballot in November. For infrastructure bonds, I would like to see what that does to the 2027 bond capacity, especially as we're projecting a lower property tax revenue. Because, in District 4, that's the main way we get our infrastructure projects. So if we're going to have a limited capacity on that, we could see fewer streets in the last cycle, and that would be unacceptable to residents in D4. So those are all my questions for today.
Thank you, Councilmember Munguia. Councilmember Pelaez.
Three things. One, I'm thinking about all the different difficult, heavy lifts that this city council, prior city councils have had to accomplish. And, I'm writing it down here, right? The Hemisphere Park plan, obviously the creation of the Alamo Dome, this Alamo project that Lori, you have lots of scars on you because of it. The baseball stadium, pre-K for SA, the Hardberger Land Bridge, the creation of the Tobin Center, our original convention center, and then the expansion, and then Via Primo, and our Riverwalk extensions, the UTSA downtown campus, and they were all difficult. They all had that in common. They all had in common also that they were done in conjunction with a pretty robust public engagement process. And they also have in common that that they were painful then and painful now in terms of traffic, in terms of having to pay for them. And I think that the best planning was done by the best planners that we had available at the time. And I think we're in a really good place. Yes, really important to have a discussion about housing and crime and domestic violence and child abuse and hunger and homelessness, and the parade of horribles is not to be diminished. But at the same time, we can walk and chew gum. And to say that we have done nothing for poor San Antonians, people who are hurting, vulnerable folks, that's not honest. This council, informed by this mayor, has for the first time in history engaged in the most full-throated conversation about compassion and access and equity, and I have no reason to believe that this next council is going to do any different. And yet, I do also believe that this next council has all of the talent and ability and smarts to be able to carry out a one-time stadium deal. I don't think that's too daunting a task. In fact, I would tell you that I think what may be more difficult was the Alamo project. Upgrading and putting fingerprints and making changes to the shrine of Texas American freedom. Lori, I have a feeling that when you look back and you write the story of your life, I have a feeling that the Alamo will probably feature more prominently on the list of things that were difficult than this one. And so I do think that this conversation merits perspective and a reminder every once in a while of where we were and where we are and what we can do going forward. And I do want to end my comments by asking two questions. One by making a comment. One, I am convinced, and it's very difficult for anybody to talk me out of the conclusion I've reached, and that is that the team we've got right now in Lori Houston and Ben Gorzel, those are the right people to execute on this project. We are going to win this, and it's going to be fantastic, and it's going to be difficult. And The people to get us to that win and the people to help us weather those difficulties are the two folks that have been presenting to us at the podium. Because you have done it in the past, and because I also know that for you, this is not just a job. Lori, you've got a little girl, right? Ben, you've got, you're a San Antonian too. And that's the other thing I want to remind everybody in the room of, is that the people who have been presenting this, the people who are working on this, these aren't folks that are just flown in from another city. These are San Antonians. These are neighbors of yours. These people go to the same church as you do. They send their kids to the same schools. They want the exact same thing everybody else does, a project that's on budget, on time, that benefits a lot of people, and that causes the least amount of pain. And I just want to make sure that you guys walk away knowing that there's one council person here who knows that you're approaching this and solving this very complicated algebra calculation in good faith, and also informed by not just the best interests of the construction company or the best interests of the basketball team, but the best interests of everybody in San Antonio, because you're going to have to see him on Sunday at church, Lori, and you're going to have to see him, Ben, at HEB or your jazzercise class or wherever it is you go on weekends. And so I will also, the lastly, my question is who right now is our public engagement firm that we are working with? And has that process, is that going to require an RFP? Are we working with somebody right now who's doing this function? Just you guys? But I mean, is it going to? Are you guys in it for now or for the remainder of the project?
So we are actively working today, and there's phase 1, which happens through the summer, and then phase 2, as Lori said earlier, as we get into the detail of each individual project, and we do community engagement, initial community engagement for each project. And then as those projects develop and become, you go through a procurement process to have a design team for it, then I believe the city will have community engagement that is even more detailed in that same design process.
Is the
So it
idea to
doesn't
have
end.
them manage the entire thing? That's my question.
Well, beyond the procurement of individual projects, I can't speak to, but we're here until we can pass the baton with a greater degree of detail for master planning, right, to happen at that point.
Okay.
But,
Thank you.
But we'll be around the city to help.
I get it. Thank
One
you.
way or the other, sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Pelaez. Just a quick time check. I know folks are here for public comment that was set to begin at 5 o'clock. I'm going to extend this meeting for another 15 minutes, and then we'll cut it off. But the time is 4:58. We'll continue on with Councilmember Kaur.
Thank you, Mayor. There were just a few more things that I wanted to mention. First of all, I wanted to thank the Spurs for coming up with a first draft of a community benefits agreement of just ideas. But I think it's really important that this community engagement that we conduct impacts that community benefits agreement, because I know some ideas have already been shared about what folks up here would like to see, but I would love for the community to say this is what we would want to see. And I keep bringing this back as an example, but if you were here during the Final Four downtown, the space was activated with locals from all over that were able to bring in free activations to do events with their kids and families. So what is it that they would want to see to be able to come back to this area weekend after weekend, whether that's free parking all week for them or whatever those benefits are, affordable housing, the amount of affordable housing that's being included. I know, Mario, that you had a previous member of your team that's now at the Housing Trust who is an expert in this work too, and so would love for us to be thinking about how do we actually put affordable housing in that CBA that comes true. That's not just this, we're going to build 2,000 units and expect those units to be built by housing bond dollars and that's it, and the Housing Trust. Like, how do we get private developers invested in that so they help us make that come to a reality? And what do we hold at, what's the carrot and stick that we're holding those folks accountable to? And I would just want to ensure that the engagement, if you can just give 1 or 2 sentences or a little bit, like 1 minute on, how do we know that the engagement's going to impact what happens in the CBA?
How do we know the engagement is going to impact what happens in the CBA? Well, the guiding principles document that we will give you that will influence, I believe will influence the housing bond conversation as well, is something that you can use and adopt officially to then adopt it as part of the housing bond implementation and the policy that you have to create to then dole out those dollars. So I believe you create guidelines and policy to select projects.
Got it. So
right?
what I'm
And then
hearing
you
is it's
can
up
use
to
that.
us, that we have to make
Right.
sure when we get those results back, it's
Yes.
up to us to ensure that what we hear is put into CBA.
Yes, and I think an important element of
Got
that is the staff hearing that and
Yeah.
anticipating. I mean, a lot of what you all are saying today is not the first time you've said it, so I think we have a pretty good sense, but it's ultimately up to the council.
Yeah, got it. Thanks, Mario.
Thank
The last thing that I want to say is I've heard a lot today, and I don't think that anyone was saying that we haven't addressed any of our infrastructure issues or any of our housing or that we haven't made gains in those. I just think there's a lot more work to do. So one of the conversations I feel like we need to continue to have is what is the actual economic benefit that Project Marvel is bringing? What are the jobs? What is the revenue that we're going to be able to use to do future projects? And is that worth it? And that's what I think the community needs to bring to be a part of. You don't have to answer it directly unless there's something you want to.
Oh, but council member, they have an answer, so.
Okay.
Well, Councilman, I just wanted to add, and thank you for that, I didn't mention it earlier, but we did ask TSL to do an economic impact analysis of the district and the projects within the district. We expect them to be done probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, great. I think that will definitely help the conversation. And that being said, I want us to just go back and think about the timeline because we do really want everyone to be excited about this, right? Number 2 pick, like we're gonna have an amazing team and we want the community to feel excited about this. And if they feel like this is done, already baked, then it's not, I don't think we've done a good enough job as council making sure that we've gotten enough input and feedback on the project. I'll end with doing a little homage to my Riverwalk folks where they always tell me, don't kill the goose that laid the golden egg. And it would be very cool, as someone mentioned this to me earlier, to take the Riverwalk and extend it all the way through the park so that wherever you are, you have access to it, that even if you're at the stadium, there's a Riverwalk level that you can access. So I'd love to say, let's also not limit ourselves to what other cities do, but think broadly and innovatively about what is true about San Antonio that we want to continue to expand through Marvel. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Core. Councilmember Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to echo the comment of which, in terms of the community benefits agreement, that community steers that conversation, sets those expectations. So thank you, Councilman, for emphasizing the importance of that. It's important that we don't create the illusion of a community benefits agreement by what, whether it's the Spurs that's proposing, city staff and or council, but it's the community laying out what those expectations are. With the research that's being done in terms of the analysis of the impact, I would like to see specifically how much is going to be into the general fund, because oftentimes when we have these analysis, they are in the billions, they are huge, but the return to the city's general fund is often very minimal. So that's something that I would hope to see in the analysis of what that impact will look like. Since VIA is here and city staff's here, my team did find out that the Silver Line's first public meeting falls on the same day as the meeting for the community engagement. So if we could work out a way to accommodate both or either or, let's work on that, please. And then in terms of the annual rent from the Spurs, where would we see that rent put back into the city budget, or where would that rent go towards?
So, Councilwoman, that lease for the arena would go back into the bond financing to fund our contribution to the project.
So it wouldn't go into the general fund for
No, ma'am.
the requests of our constituents, okay. And then lastly, when can we expect another public meeting on Project Marvel?
Internally, that's part of my question or my answer to the councilman. I'm assuming that once the complete mayor and council are sworn in and take their positions, that we will likely have another public meeting. That's internally, I'm planning for that, but I'm gonna, obviously, we will have a couple of new members here, and I think they'll have some thoughts about that as well.
Okay, and I did have one more question that I missed. In terms of the community engagement and the neighborhood associations that you all identified, how were those identified? Was it those that specifically abut the sports district, or how were those selected?
Those were identified because they're surrounding the sports entertainment district, and those are the ones that are going to be impacted the most by traffic. But as we meet with you and you have organizations that you think we need to meet separately, we'll take those and reach out to them and have a stakeholder meeting.
Okay, and I asked that question, and I, again, right, appreciate the community engagement plan that you all have laid out. There are concerns that I'm hearing from folks in terms that it is a rush process, but I think it is important that we engage sooner than later in terms of what we're being briefed today and what the community's expectations are. But what I mentioned in terms of this is something I've shared with staff, the radius in which that the tax will be pulled from, the PFC zone. There's a misconception that, it's within that radius that folks are going to feel some type of economic impact in terms of increased property taxes. So, for example, like the Palm Heights community, the Collins Garden community fall within this radius, and while it's not necessarily them being taxed, it's those tax being absorbed to potentially fund Project Marvel. I think within the public community meeting, if you all can highlight and walk community through like what that zone is and what it means for Project Marvel overall.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We'll make sure we incorporate that. Councilwoman, is there, is your question about when is the next one? Do you have from y'all's perspective, do you have an idea when you'd like to have another one?
I think with the new council, it's important that everyone's brought up to speed on where things have been. And I know you all have been having those conversations one-on-one already, but I do think it's important for us to have a public briefing on where things are at.
Yeah. No, and we have not had those one-on-one conversations with anybody who is not here yet.
No mayoral candidate has had a briefing?
Not on this issue.
Okay, thank you for that.
Not for me. Councilwoman, what were the two meetings that we needed to align? Or
the Via Silverline meeting and then the community engagement for Project Marvel.
Is that in your district or
yes.
is it? Okay, all right.
Thank you, Councilmember Castillo. Councilmember McKee Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll start off by saying I'm sure we will only have a new member and 4 new council members. I know people keep saying 5, but I'm going to predict less of a shakeup. I will say I felt my comments to be very clear, but my highly educated colleague who arrived late and left early on his way out intentionally misdirected many of my comments. So I want to reiterate a few things clearly and plainly. One, support for our efforts, Ready to Work, Pre-K for SA, our bond programs, our equity lens, our strategic housing implementation plan, Vision Zero, and the countless other plans. We have a lot of need and a lot of work, but that doesn't erase the need that many people feel. And I sought to illustrate why so many people in our community felt so vehemently opposed to Project Marvel and what they believe to be a misinvestment on our end. Second, I also support a housing and infrastructure bond for November. Again, that's one of those things that we could do on our own. And so brings me to the third thing. The Spurs do need to contribute beyond a fraction of the arena cost. They need to contribute to the housing, infrastructure, and the other needs that I laid out, and we're gonna have to be creative in how we figure out how that works. We also need to ensure, as many others have said, that the community engagement effort informs our community benefits agreement. And then lastly, we need to ensure that the abandoned East Side community is tangibly approved, and that again, the Spurs play into that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McKee Rodriguez. Any further discussion on this item? All right, well, I think this was obviously a very helpful conversation. What I want to emphasize to folks who are listening is that what we are proposing here is a sports and entertainment district that provides for a comprehensive and cohesive growth plan for downtown San Antonio, considering the fact that many of these projects are already underway. Do we want to tie them all together in a cohesive vision that makes downtown San Antonio more inviting for local residents and also realizes some of the aspirational goals that we have, such as we want to see the next home for the San Antonio Spurs be in downtown San Antonio? If we can do that, the proposed layout here and the financing mechanisms of that arena would be derived from the revenue produced by the development itself. And so the question is always, what are the opportunity costs? Does this offset any of our existing priorities with respect to housing or infrastructure or other elements of things that we are committed to in the city? And I'm very happy with what you laid out, Ben, in terms of how this financing structure can work. again, using the revenues that are produced only if we have this development that's guaranteed in this sports and entertainment district. So thank you very much again for all of the work and the presentations. We have ongoing activity with respect to the financial plan as well as the community engagement. So looking forward to the next steps of this, and thank you to my colleagues for engaging so well. Time is now 5:10 p.m. on the 4th day of June 2025, and B session is now adjourned. We'll take a 2-minute break, and we'll be back for public comment period, which had been set for 5 o'clock.